Cavosa Excavating is a family-owned and operated company specializing in the installation of Title V septic systems. Cavosa Excavating is one of the largest septic system installers on Cape Cod. Whether it's upgrading your current system or installing a whole new system, Cavosa Excavating can do the job. Cavosa Excavating, 508-563-5530.
Nestled in a classic New England setting amid 200-year-old elm trees and charming colonial homes, stately sea captains' homes, and charming Cape Cod salt boxes, Shoreway Acres is a graceful blend of Cape Cod's past and present. Shoreway Acres, proud sponsor of Falmouth Community Television.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Monday, April 9, 2012 meeting of the Falmouth Board of Selectmen. I invite you all to rise and join us as we recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. As some of you may have noticed, Chairman Flynn and Vice Chairman Freitag will not be joining us this evening. As the senior-most member of the board, I am serving as acting chairman. And just one quick announcement that next Monday is Patriots' Day, and Town Hall is closed, and in observance of the holiday, the board will not be meeting. First on our agenda this evening, we have a report from the Conservation Commission. Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Oh, my chocolate, that's going to come on now. Let's see whether that's true or not.
Well, you know, this is your room too. Maybe we need to hold that button down.
Did I not push it
Yep,
hard
here it
enough,
comes.
Chuck? It's coming, yeah.
Oh, okay. Good
Here.
call.
Press it twice, it stops.
Dies.
Can you see that?
Okay.
Yes. Okay, good evening, and this is our annual report. We actually didn't give a report last year, so it's going to be a
Madam Chair, could you speak into the microphone? The folks at home can't hear unless you do.
Thanks, I never would have remembered that. And then I'll tell you a little bit about your Conservation Commission, and then about what we've done the last couple of years. Oh. Okay. Conservation commissions were established in 1957 in Massachusetts general law, and every town and municipality in Massachusetts has a Conservation Commission. Their first charge was to manage conservation lands, and we still have that responsibility. In 1972, the Clean Water Act, Federal Clean Water Act, was passed, and Massachusetts was the first state to pass its own Wetlands Protection Act, and Home Rule allowed Falmouth to establish a Falmouth Wetlands Bylaw in 1979. And so the other job of the Conservation Commission, and actually the one that takes about 95% of our energy, is as a regulatory body. And we regulate lands under the jurisdiction of the Wetlands Protection Act and the Falmouth Wetlands Bylaw. So what lands are those? It's any wetland, including any bank, freshwater wetland, coastal wetland, beach, dune, tidal flat, marsh, or swamp bordering on the ocean, any estuary, creek, river, stream, pond, lake, vernal pool, land under any of those water bodies, land containing shellfish, land subject to tidal action, coastal storm flowage or flooding, and riverfront areas in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. In addition, a 100-foot buffer zone around any freshwater or coastal resource. Okay, what activities are regulated? Any activities that remove, fill, dredge, build upon, degrade, or otherwise alter an area subject to protection. And I would say, again, 95% or more of these activities take place in the buffer zone, which is a regulated resource under the bylaw. Okay, why is it important? Why is it important to protect these resources? These resources help protect our public and private water supply, groundwater supply, flood control. They serve for storm damage prevention, prevention of pollution, protection of land containing shellfish, protection of wildlife habitat, and protection of fisheries. These are all interests that are protected under the Act and the bylaw. In addition, the following four interests are protected by the bylaw: erosion sediment control, agriculture, aesthetics, recreation, and aquaculture. Okay, I just want to introduce you a little bit to the 10 members of the Conservation Commission as they presently sit. These are professional activities of members of the board. All of them, almost all of the members professionally have worked in the field, and we all have a lot of experience on regulatory boards, either serving on the regulatory board and or appearing before regulatory boards in other jurisdictions. So the members of our commission have experience with agriculture, commercial shellfishing, construction of buildings, construction with road paving and drainage, septic installers, education, both teaching and administration. We have 3 professional engineers, a hydrologist, a stormwater engineer, and a marine engineer. We have people with landscape experience, landscape designers, landscape architects, and people who have experience with low-impact development. And we have people with science backgrounds, marine ecology, coastal and land management, wildlife biology, and marine policy. Everyone on our board owns a home here in Falmouth. Many members of our boards are long-time or were born here in Falmouth, and we also have people who weren't born here but have experience not only in Falmouth but in a number of different jurisdictions. Okay, what kind of wetlands do we have? Well, we all know we have wetlands in Falmouth. That's part of what all of us enjoy about Falmouth. But unlike many areas, we have these long linear, let's see if I can get this to work, coastal ponds. We have marshes along the Buzzards Bay coast. And if you look at the actual wetlands jurisdiction, and Bob Shea did this for me a few years ago, we actually have 95 miles of saltwater coast. This includes 18.5 miles along Buzzards Bay, 11.8 miles along Vineyard Sound, and and I can't even read that, 64 miles in the inland saltwater areas. Whoops. Plus, that doesn't count all the fresh water that's within our jurisdiction. So what does that mean? Anybody within jurisdiction that's going to build upon, dredge, fill, or otherwise alter has to come for a permit. I went back to 2008 just to show you that, whoops, sorry about that. Normally, the years that I've been on since 2004, started as an alternate. We normally have about 100 NOIs. It dropped down a little bit in 2010 and 2011. 2012, for the first quarter of the year, we've already had 29, which projects to over 100 for the year, which I think is a good sign. I hope that it's a good sign for the economy of the town. Requests for determination of applicability are for people who are working in our jurisdiction, but the activities are unlikely to degrade the resources. Okay, so here's the summary of, see, get this, 2010. These are notices of intent. Requests for determination of applicability. These are amended orders of commission, or orders of conditions. These are enforcement orders. These are administrative reviews. And these are certificates of compliance. Okay, the Conservation Commission has 7 members and 3 alternate members. We have 35 to 45 meetings per year, and our meetings last 2 to sometimes more than 4 hours. The attendance of the members is greater than 85%. It ranges from 78% to 94%. We've always had a quorum for every meeting. And the one thing everyone on the commission always agrees on is when it's time to adjourn. Okay, in addition to notices of intent, during our meetings, we often have presentations to either learn something new about our areas of jurisdiction or give a report on an ongoing project. And so just to give you an example, in the past year, we've had presentations on the Coonamessett River options to improve fish passage and habitat, and I'll tell you about that in a minute. We've also had Cedar Lake Fish Run restoration. DNR is sort of spearheading a project working with engineering to improve the herring run into Cedar Lake. And the 300 committee gave us a presentation just a couple of weeks ago, and I particularly want to highlight the fact that the 300 committee has a memorandum of agreement with the town, with the Conservation Commission, and do a tremendous job in helping us manage our conservation lands, including, for those of you who would like to do it, come next late fall, winter season, they'll be looking for bodies to help clear trails. That's one of the things you can do. And you can become a steward. Several of the members of our commission are stewards with the 300 committee. There are a number of jobs you can do to help. We had NSTAR 2 weeks ago. As most of you probably know, there was certainly concern and perhaps NSTAR didn't provide as much communication as we all might have liked ahead of time. But they did offer to come in, their environmental expert, came in and went through the whole process of what their responsibilities are, how, what laws and they have, and in fact, one of the things that several people from NSTAR have told me is that with the power outages, including the power outage last fall, the federal restrictions on what the power companies have to do have gotten even more stringent. And then on April 25th, we're going to have a presentation by scientists from USGS on a water quality study that they're doing in West Falmouth Harbor. Okay, the Coonamessett River parcel. This is Coonamessett River is something that's caused a lot of controversy in the past through the town. For the last couple of years, the position that the Conservation Commission has taken is that the town as a whole has made it clear that they have several management goals. And so among those are cranberry growing, and we do have a grower, Fred Bottomley, and Fred has given an annual report for this year, a written annual report, but we'd like him to give a presentation before the commission. And Jen is working on scheduling that. We do have some stewards of the Coonamessett River land through the 300 Committee. And of course, the 300 Committee is working to develop a greenway from Coonamessett Pond all the way down to Vineyard Sound. We have completed a grant funded through Fish America and NOAA to improve fish passage. And this is the presentation I mentioned. Interfluve, which is a company that does river restoration projects, did the engineering study and also worked with various stakeholders. And I don't think any of you were at that meeting, but it was the first meeting that sort of pro-river, pro-bog people were at, and everyone agreed that it was a good meeting. They liked the way we were moving forward. And so we're trying to keep up that momentum. And right now we're exploring funding for the next step. We just learned last week that the last grant we wrote didn't get accepted, but I just got a call from someone tonight and said there are 2 more that we can apply for. So I'm eagerly awaiting that information. Okay, the other thing I want to tell you is that a lot of the work that's done by other town departments and committees and commissions have to do with the wetland resources. And what's really important is to have good communication, and which we have had. And for instance, with the restoration of the Cedar Lake Fish Run that Chuck and Scott Schluter from engineering and Peter McConerty from engineering have been working on, before we actually had the permitting meeting, we had a preliminary presentation, so we understood where they were going. And I know Jen spent a lot of time with them working through wetlands issues. Also, the Beach Committee and Beach Department and the Waterways Committee and the town harbor master worked hard to develop comprehensive management plans for their, in one case for the beaches, in the other case for dredging inlets. This is, they're really applauded. I applaud them for doing that. It makes the process much better for them because, for instance, for the dredging harbors, that's a 5-year, they have a 5-year order of conditions. And so it means that we're not seeing them again and then again. They don't have to keep coming in. And, you know, they can sort of plan ahead. They know what they have permission to do. Last thing I want to talk about is stormwater improvements. This is a picture for those of, does everybody here know Old Dock Road? This is a picture of Old Dock Road, and this is a super high tide. As you can see, it covers the dock, goes right onto the road. I might mention that the straw bales that you see there are installed because the town was working on a stormwater project, because we have stormwater drains near there. Okay, this is a half tide. It's about a 4-foot tide there. This is what it normally looks like. Okay, just to give you another example of super high tides, this is again a half tide at Mashapaquet Creek. The bottom picture, 10 August 2010, is sort of a normal high tide. The 12 December 2009 is a sort of abnormal high tide, but we're seeing these more and more frequently. Okay, just a brief overview. I think this is probably from a first-year college textbook of the water cycle, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. But the two things I want to mention are surface runoff, which is one of the things we're trying to prevent, surface runoff of sediments into our water bodies. And I also want to mention what happens when the land meets the sea. Okay, if this could be a picture from Vineyard Sound, here's a normal sea level. Here's the normal high tide, 1 to 2 feet. A storm surge in that area, some of those areas is about 15 feet. If you have a storm and a high tide, it goes up to 17 feet. Sea level has risen in this area more than a foot in the last 100 years. It's expected to go up 1 to 2 feet in the next 50 years. And the implications of this are not only the buildings and infrastructure along the coast, it also includes any sewering that's there. It also includes what effect it has on our groundwater, as we have saltwater intrusion into our groundwater supplies. Just to give you an example, we tend to, I had to review a book about 1995, and it was about storm hazards. And one of the chapters I found most interesting was the sociology of storm hazards, and that people tend to forget when a storm occurs, people are very concerned about what happens by the coast. And then 5 years goes by, 10 years, 15, 20, and those of you who remember Hurricane Bob, you know, Bob was around 20 years ago. And around 20 years, people start to think, it couldn't happen here. You know, it's not that bad. We can do that building, so forth. This is West Falmouth Harbor. Whoops. This is West Falmouth Harbor. This is Bowerman's Beach Club. This is the end of Old Dock Road. From here to here is about a half a mile, to give you perspective by the road. If we get a Category 5 hurricane, everything to the west of 28A is going to be flooded. This is Bowerman's Beach Club sitting on the lawn by Old Dock Road after the 1938 hurricane. This is another part of Bowerman's Beach Club and other debris sitting by the coastal bank by the houses in front of Old Dock Road. So there are certain things that we as a commission can do and the building department can do to try to maintain and allow people to have homes along the sea and to protect them as best as possible and to protect the resources as best as possible. But as a town, we have to start thinking of sort of a comprehensive strategy to deal with sea level rise and the implications of it, especially with storms. Okay, I'd like to end by giving thanks to all my fellow members of the Conservation Commission who collectively, if you added all the hours of the people who volunteer their time for the Conservation Commission, collectively, we're more than one town employee. I'd also like to thank Jen and Mark, who do a wonderful job supporting our work and do a lot of stuff behind the scenes. And also town departments, Department of Natural Resources, the Harbor Master, DPW, Engineering, Roads and Parks, Bob Shea and GIS, Town Council, Building, Zoning and Health, Accounting and Administration. And again, a big thanks to the 300 Committee who help us manage lands, and the Coonamessett River Trust, Falmouth Fishermen's Association, and the Botany Club of Cape Cod and the Islands, who have devoted a lot of volunteer time and done a lot of monitoring of conditions in the Coonamessett River, that we could not get grants to help restore that if we didn't have this level of citizen commitment. Thank you.
Questions from the board?
You want lights?
That'd be a good idea. Can we get those?
I'll get them.
Thank you.
I'll get them while you're thinking of questions.
Actually, I just, not a question, but just a reminder that we've had this discussion recently amongst the board with respect to grants. So if you folks do happen to get, if the grants are awarded, just make sure you coordinate with the chair.
We always do.
Okay.
We always do. I always go to Heather, because Heather's sort of been our point person on the Coonamessett. And before we put the grant in, we get your permission. And if we're awarded the grant, which we hope we get awarded the next grant, we come and
Okay.
talk to you about it.
Good.
Thank you. Yes, I know that is a,
It's been a hot topic recently.
right, and we want to get everybody into the habit of doing that.
Yep. Anyone
Thanks,
else?
Brett.
Mr.
And
Murphy?
just to follow up on the grant scenario, we want to make sure that we put the horse before the cart, not we apply for the grant and then we wait to see whether we accept it. But the Board of Selectmen looks at whether we want to apply for a grant. If I can use an illustration, the town, and it's not about the Conservation Commission, received a grant from the state for implementation of pay-as-you-throw. Now, the board never had a hearing on it, and we were awarded the grant. But the state is going to get to a position, if we decide not to take it, is the town of Falmouth crying wolf? They apply for grants, and then they don't want the grant after we give it to them. So the next time around, if we decide afterwards that we don't want the grant, they may not look favorably on the town of Falmouth. In fact, think that every grant we apply for, we want to get. So just so that people don't waste their time, it's probably important that they bring forward to us before you apply for the grant, not after you get the grant, because I think that's a discussion we have to continue to have. But it's important, we don't want to waste, there is a lot of time and energy, as we all know, in applying for a grant. A good grant writer is worth their weight in gold, and we want to make sure that we're headed in the right direction.
And I always want a letter of support from you when I put in a grant.
That's always,
That is very helpful, too.
sure. A couple of things, and you brought up a good point in regard to, inside Route 28, that, there would be potential in the flooding of those properties if we were to have a Category 5 hurricane. I continue to tell people that they need to look at maps, what's velocity zone, what is flood zone, but there are some specific areas there that folks have to understand. Buyer beware. If you're going to be on the ocean, you're going to be relatively close to the ocean, you need to understand that you could ultimately be vulnerable. Most of those folks, good, bad, or indifferent, have flood insurance or something of that nature to protect their investment. And it's a balancing act, at least I think, from a policy standpoint, that folks who own property pay a large portion of the tax revenue in this community, because those closer to the waterfront typically pay a higher percentage, with the exception of certain neighborhoods. So we want to make sure that we portray that just because you're within the storm surge area or the flood zone, that we can't head backwards. We can only try to prepare for the future. So that being said, one of the questions I wanted to ask, and I asked it as we were doing the budgeting process this year, and I typically ask it is, we always try to make Falmouth a friendlier place to those who come visit us, but also those folks who own properties here. And my question is, litigation and the idea of appeals versus, positive, in other words, orders of conditions. And I'm sure you have the numbers handy because you and I have spoken.
I certainly do.
Well, that's
And I would have
great.
even if we hadn't spoken
I
before
would be
this.
remiss if I didn't ask you, the number of orders and conditions that have been appealed and then granted a change of the order of conditions, number one. Number two is, how many of those orders of conditions are we litigating? Because, folks always want to capitalize on maybe what is a minority, but we also want to try to look to find a way that something can be done, not always tell people why that it can't be done. Let's find a reason that it can be done. So my question to you is, number one, how many orders of conditions have been appealed to court? Number two, how many have been amended? Do you have any ideas on any of those?
Well, a lot, I shouldn't say a lot, but you saw that I can tell you right now.
Right, but everything's in writing, so I want to ask that for the public audience out there. They're listening to this meeting and they don't have
Okay.
the benefit of everything I have in writing.
Okay, amended orders with 79 notices of intent, but amended orders could have been on orders that were issued the previous 3 years. There were 27, and in 2011, there were 18. Now, amended orders often aren't because they're questioning what we've allowed. Amended orders are, when we issue an order of conditions, it says, if you're making any change from the order that you have to come in and get permission. Many of the changes, people come in and they say to Jen, we have to do this instead of this. She says, go ahead, that's fine. But if it's a major change from what was permitted, then they have to come for an amended order.
So some of them can be done via an administrative review?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep. And for instance, when there were 27 amended orders, there were 66 administrative reviews.
Okay. And so the next question, litigation.
Okay,
How many-
litigation. The litigation arises in it arises in two ways. One is if we deny an order of conditions, the applicant might appeal that. They might litigate. Okay, that happens consistently over the last 5 or 6 years, about 5% of the cases. We only issue a denial if the project doesn't meet performance standards. I mean, if it meets performance standards, they can do the project. And one of the reasons why I showed what the experience in our board is, every month, somebody or another who sits in the audience of conservation either comes up here or says it after the meeting, I'm really impressed with the expertise on the board. Because a lot of times, projects come, and somebody on the board will say, well, if you did it this way, that would be better for the resources and it would be better for you. And the engineer would say, absolutely, you're right. And so sometimes people change projects because of suggestions we make.
Okay.
Basically, I would like to approve all projects, and if everybody comes to us with things that meet the performance standards, I can guarantee they'll get an approval.
This past year, there's been a couple of instances that were very public in the press. And I wouldn't be doing my job unless I asked about how they arose. Meaning there were a couple that were a number of years old, some properties changed ownership and things of that nature. How did those come about, that the Conservation Commission all of a sudden discovered things that happened to be probably not met an order of conditions that were multiple years before?
It usually comes, I'll confirm this with Jen and my other members. It usually comes about because they haven't received a certificate of compliance, and they have to clear it out because it's recorded on the deed, and they have to get a certificate of compliance before the land can be transferred. And in researching whether they have a certificate of compliance, it's often found that people haven't complied. This isn't, you've heard of a couple of cases in the newspaper. We have cases, say, of 100 NOIs and RDAs, there's a half a dozen each year where the certificate of compliance is completed. In other words, it's discovered that they need to do more planting, something like that, and it's completed through an RDA, sometimes through a notice if it's a bigger project.
Is there a statute of limitations on any of that?
Yeah, 3 years from the date it changes hands.
No, my question is there a statute of limitations with the certificate of compliance?
No. If you register an order
Mm-hmm.
on your deed, you need to register a certificate of compliance.
Okay. But my question to you then would be, and I want people, keep in mind that this is all educational for the
Right,
public
right.
as well. My question would be that someone had done something 20 years ago, and of course the regulation was a lot different than it is today, and they merely never filed a certificate of compliance. If they come forward to file a certificate of compliance, would they now have to come to the new wetlands regulations?
No, if they fulfilled everything in their original order of conditions, then they can get a certificate of compliance. If they haven't, and they've done things that weren't allowed in that order of conditions, then it's seen as a new NOI.
Okay. Well, that's good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Betsy, can you tell me how far along Falmouth is in managing stormwater runoff?
How far along?
Yeah, have we?
We're working on it. Yeah, what's happened is the federal government has issued a new stormwater regulations, and we're still sort of catching up on the previous one,
Okay.
but we're working on it.
Okay. Secondly,
Yeah, engineering is working on it.
okay.
It doesn't fall under our
I got you.
purview, except that we're certainly willing to help
Okay.
where we can.
I appreciate that. Secondly, there's a item coming up next on this agenda regarding shellfish. I was wondering if you had an opportunity, if you have time this evening, to stay here and listen to it. It's got to do with the shellfish relay.
I
and
would
could probably
love
really-
to stay and listen.
Great. That's what I use your opinion. I'd like to hear what you have to say about it. Thank you,
Okay,
Mr. Chair.
Brent?
Any last questions? All right, I think we're all set. Oh, any questions or comments from the audience? All right, I think we're good. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
May I get my memory stick before you? May I go off and get it? I'm afraid I'll forget. I actually have this, but I'll send it to you because you need it, because I gave it. But I'll send it tomorrow.
Okay, I just don't see your sticker.
Here it is, right here.
With the fish.
Yeah.
Okay. Next item on our agenda is a discussion of fisheries management. The Natural Resources Department has a presentation for us. Mr. Martinson?
Thank you. Chuck Martinson, Acting Director of Natural Resources. This meeting was actually at the request of a handful of commercial shell fishermen, so I will let them present first in respect to their request.
All right.
And I'm just going to momentarily, as they're set, before they go, get the presentation ready.
Is David Brown here then?
Mr. Chairman, board members.
Good evening.
Dave Brown. I've been asked by the commercial shell fishermen and recreational shell fishermen, a large group of them also, to talk to you about the demise of the fishery in Falmouth a little bit.
Do make sure you speak into the microphone. You can adjust it if you need to.
And I hope you don't mind me reading. I'm a poor public speaker, and I'll miss a lot if I don't cover it. It's just a couple paragraphs. And we're here tonight because Falmouth shell fishery has collapsed. and the fishery is indicative of the health of the estuaries. Falmouth plans to spend in excess of, I believe, $200 million in sewering in the future in an attempt to save these ponds. The sewering is a long way off, and by then we're going to be looking at underwater deserts. The ponds are dying at a remarkable rate, and there are a lot of species that exist around the shellfish, so a healthy shell fishery is extremely important. And it seems like for what is a comparatively small sum, we can begin to make a difference now. And it seems like for the last about 30 or 40 years, we've returned about 15 to 20% of what we take in license fees back into propagation. Falmouth spends less than almost all of the towns on the Cape in propagation, even though we have more coastline than any other town. Barnstable, which is the closest town in size to Falmouth, they're just a little bit less than us in water. Their propagation budget is about $100,000 a year, and that doesn't include operating expenses, that's just for propagation. Mashpee, which has, I don't know, probably 20–25% of the water that Falmouth has, almost matches us, or actually might even exceed us a little bit in the amount of their propagation budget. Seems like not investing in our waters has led to a further decline in the health of our estuaries. It's dramatically reduced the recreational harvest and has destroyed what just 15 to 20 years ago was a multi-million-dollar industry here in Falmouth. Shellfish have a real and measurable effect on nitrogen loading. Not investing now is going to cost us a lot more in the future. Other towns on the Cape face the same obstacles Falmouth does, but have decided to invest in their fisheries and are seeing results. Barnstable was in the same predicament we are about 10 years ago, and through a strong management and propagation program, have one of the best programs on the Cape and seeing results now. And it was about 10 years ago when Paul Montague resigned as shellfish warden in Falmouth. Paul had said the job was more than any one man could do in 40 hours. It was decided that the position would be better served in the DNR. Unfortunately, his position was never filled. Now, Chuck is smart and a hard worker, but nobody, not one person, can do all the jobs that he already had before the shellfish position went in there. And then he was expected to take that on also. The result is we haven't had a full-time warden, and it's put additional stress on the staff of the DNR. If this were Chuck's only job, we probably wouldn't be here right now. But as you all know, he has multiple jobs. But as Paul said, it's not a full-time, said it's a full-time job and then some. And we're here tonight because we need a full-time person to take care of the shell fishery. Whether it's a constable, a warden, a technician, we need somebody full-time to start tending to business here. It's what we have now it's just not working. It's great that we have the volunteers, but they need somebody to guide them and assist them. Again, I'm going to use Barnstable as an example. They have a full-time shellfish biologist and a full-time shellfish technician. Chatham has a full-time constable and a full-time propagation technician. Wellfleet has a full-time constable, a deputy constable, and an assistant constable. We're one of the only towns on the Cape that doesn't have a full-time shellfish warden. Propagation. It's time to explore some different propagation techniques. We'd like to see utilizing field plant cohogs, predator netting for catching softshell clams, and once again, when it comes to the shellfish position, we need somebody who understands shellfish husbandry, understands shellfish habitat, and is able to start work soon. I mean, not somebody coming out of college this is going to be a long learning process. We need somebody who can hit the ground running. Now, I know Chuck has a big presentation about the Taunton River and the relay, but Marine Fisheries has asked that this be delayed until they can be here. I know they've been in touch with Mr. Suso's secretary. Chuck submitted a list of questions to them on Friday. As you know, it's a holiday weekend, and they need time to put the answers together. They had planned on being here tonight until they would receive that list on Friday. And I don't think it's fair to have a one-sided debate on something so important. Marine Fisheries is bringing their biologists, their PhDs, their scientists. They want to answer all of Chuck's questions, all of your questions, and they want the debate to be even, fair. So I'm going to ask that as far as the shellfish relay, that be put off. I know they've been in touch with the Selectmen's Secretary to reschedule to the soonest possible date. So, and I know there are a few other fishermen who would like to speak. I've asked them, not to be redundant and go over the same things, so if you would, thank you.
Well, before we
You
go
have
to
any
the
questions
audience, yeah, any questions for Mr. Brown?
I just want to make sure that I do a little disclosure here. I own a restaurant that features both oysters, clams, and shellfish, as well as additional products. But I wanted to make sure that I disclosed that before we continued this. Thank you.
Okay. Did you want to comment on having the fisheries, state fisheries come in? Do we want to reschedule Mr. Martinson's presentation, or?
Well, the only thing that I had seen, Mr. Chairman, was an email that came in indicating that some questions had been raised by Mr. Martinson and that the officials would not be able to provide the answers until, I believe, tomorrow. But I don't recall seeing a specific request that this be delayed or postponed, or that Chuck not be given the opportunity to go forward. This is the first time I had heard Mr. that Chair. personally.
We've done issues before where, we have one presentation on one day, another one on another time, and we have to make a collective decision, which I feel comfortable with. I can do that. I mean, the time is now allotted for this on our agenda, and
I believe that this is an issue that if one side were able to percolate for a period of time before there was some balance on the issue on the other side, that the issue might get so far ahead that it would be inconceivable to be able to have a fair and balanced discussion on it. My suggestion would be, first off, is that some of these folks have approached me, and I've gotten some emails and things of that nature from anybody. Chuck does a great job in a lot of things he does, and including this. However, we have to keep in mind that nothing is going to happen tonight. This relay is not going to happen tomorrow. I know that Chuck went at length to make a presentation, but my suggestion would be that we have fair and balance, and I think we need to put everybody in the same room at the same time. If we hear one side of the story today, and then another side 3 weeks from now, well, nothing's going to happen between now and 3 weeks anyways. I don't think, it's not even on the agenda to vote on anything. So I think it's an issue that we need to look at and study, but make sure that when we're approached with the idea of getting the facts, that we get all the facts at the same time, not one side of the story and then we wait for a little time to get the other. That's my opinion. It's up to the board.
Okay. Mr. Martinson, you had some comments?
Chuck Martinson, Acting Director of Natural Resources. Board members, I attended a meeting about 5 or 6 weeks ago with a large amount of commercial shell fishermen and 2 biologists from the Massachusetts Division of Marine Fisheries. They were able to attend this meeting on a Sunday afternoon at 4 o'clock. I only found out on a Friday afternoon that they were going to be coming, and they did not notify me. At their meeting, which I attended for approximately 10 minutes and was asked to leave the room, I was told by them, as were many of the fishermen in this room, that they would be more than happy to come down and present to the town of Falmouth. I emailed Greg Sawyer from the Division of Marine Fisheries on Monday, March 19th, with a series of questions, which he never returned my email. I have the email right here. It's not like this just came up Friday. This came up 3 weeks ago. Frankly, I think the Division of Marine Fisheries is quite nervous because of the work that we've been doing. And I think that, the members of this community have the right to know how we protect them and how we keep our natural resources safe. And I don't know if that discussion will happen if we end it here tonight. They've tucked in their horns and gone home. That's all.
I've heard both sides of the issue. If Mr. Martinson, if you're inclined to do your presentation, you're here. I think, as Mr. Murphy said, I don't think this issue is going to end tonight, so I don't think there's any harm in having you present what you have, and then the board can take this up at a later date to complete this process. So for everyone in the audience, I'm going to let Mr. Martinson proceed, and then we'll open it up to comments and questions from the floor.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'll shut off the lights here.
Can we have a vote on that, Mr. Chairman?
If you'd like.
I'd just make a motion that we hold this all off. Keeping in mind, Mr. Martinson is in a position of authority. He regulates each and every one of these folks who's in this room, whether they be a recreational fisherman or a commercial fisherman. He means well, but a lot of folks can be intimidated by, i.e. the chief of police, and in this case, that's what this is. I think that it would be best served that we set up some sort of subcommittee and then come forward with the facts and all the facts at the same time. So I make a motion that we continue this when in fact we can get a balanced presentation from both sides.
Well, I'll second it for discussion.
Kevin, when you say subcommittee, you mean?
I think it would be important to put together all the players, a representative from the marine fisheries, Mr. Martinson, as well as maybe someone from the Conservation Commission, someone not maybe from the Board of Selectmen, because we'll be the ultimate ones that hear this, but maybe even someone in the town manager's office. Somebody that can mediate this type of scenario and hear all the facts. I read that we have a policy relatively in regard to this, but I don't ever remember voting a policy. We probably need to move forward. It may be inappropriate to do shellfish relays from the Taunton River, but that doesn't mean that it might be inappropriate to do a shellfish relay from some other location. So we need to have all the facts. It appears that this has come to a bubbling point. I can see by the body language in Mr. Martinson that he's not pleased this evening. I don't want it to come to that. I don't think that's going to suit and make anybody happy in this room. We have heard in the past, and we know that we don't spend enough money in this town for a lot of things, and things like beach nourishment and propagation of, in fact, seed and things of that nature. Even the Chamber of, the Falmouth Economic Development Council has a subcommittee now that is working on aquaculture because they feel it's an important aspect of this community in moving forward. We look behind us, and in the town seal, farming was part of it, but farming, in fact, is as well as aquaculture, whether it be natural aquaculture or farm-raised aquaculture. I think Mr. Martinson would agree how important that is. And if we can come to a solution and work together to try to come up with some kind of policy versus trying to head something off, it's evident that this came forward, and Chuck, before we get going, doesn't like this particular scenario, but maybe we need to talk this through and have everybody at the table when we talk it through. If we're talking it tonight, we're not going to have everybody at the table. So that's the reason that I would move that we would continue this and try to set up some kind of committee where the fisheries, Mr. Martinson, the commercial fishermen, the recreational fishermen, as well as someone in regard to science or the Conservation Commission be involved. We could even expand that group a little bit more, but spearheaded by our town management, either Mr. Suso or Heather. So that was my motion to whatever.
Mr. Braga, any thoughts?
As you know, I'm the member of our representative for the Cape Cod Water Protection Collaborative. We meet down in Barnstable, and it's all about wastewater, very important issue. We've had to do it in a way where one month a group comes in, makes a presentation, the next month the second group makes it, and then we have to take a vote on it, looking at all the information, bringing it together. I feel like I can do that, but I also understand Kevin's concerns. I am leaning towards, I'd like to hear his presentation. Then I want to hear from the other side on another date. And with all their documents put together, then if we want to, if we have a problem, I have no problem with putting together a subcommittee to take all the documents from both sides, any presentations made, like we had to do with the MEP model, and have to find a group to issue an opinion on that. I'm comfortable going ahead tonight, but I was prepared to go ahead and, see what you want to do.
We have, I think, two issues here. On the one hand, I think Mr. Brown's presentation was more focused on the management of the fishery and the resources that the town has put towards it. I know Mr. Martinson is probably going to have a significant focus, and correct me if I'm wrong, on this whole question of the relay from Taunton, or the Taunton River. So I guess one of the things I need some clarification from would be, do we want to move it, Mr. Murphy, you say you'd like to hold off on the whole question of the river relay issue, the shellfish relay issue with the Taunton River. Do we want to hold off on that aspect of the discussion and focus simply on Mr. Brown's presentation and the question of resources for shellfish management? There are a lot of folks here this evening who I would assume have come out to speak, I don't know, for one or both of these particular issues. Do we want to send them home, or do we want to hear part of the issue here?
Remember, this agenda item was prompted by a letter from a group representing the shellfishermen. I don't know how we got to this relay, because actually what they're asking for is us to pay more attention to the fishery. So now we're heading it off. All of a sudden we're talking about this. And I don't think that was really what the agenda item was. This was not Mr. Martinson's agenda item. This was an item that was spurred by this group. I think if we come back and we have an agenda item based on shellfish relay, we need to talk about that at a separate time. It really wasn't designed on the agenda. If we really look at it, this was to talk about, the shellfish, the Natural Resources Department, fisheries management, basically, and it was prompted by the commercial shell fishermen. So let's talk about that tonight, and then we'll move for another night to talk about how we can work that, whether it be upwellers or whether it in fact can be an area where it's a shellfish relay. So that's my point. I think Chuck would be happy to talk tonight about the fisheries and keep this separate, but I'm not going to speak for him.
I think you have a good point there, Mr. Murphy, and you're right, the agenda does say nothing about the question of the shellfish relay or whether we should approve it tonight or even hear a discussion of it tonight. Mr. Martinson, your presentation, I'm not sure how it's assembled, but could we focus on just the management of the fishery as opposed to any discussion of the proposed shellfish relay that the state has asked?
Correct. Understood. The presentation is interlaced back and forth, and it's you guys are going to be seeing it all the way. It's they're two issues. I think what if it's all right, if I may also mention, on March 2nd, David Heffernan wrote a lengthy letter representing the commercial. Some commercial shell fishermen, I understood it to be, which was received March 2nd. And the fourth paragraph, the whole entire paragraph discusses the contaminated relay and bringing it in the town of Falmouth. One other point I'd like to make, when the coastal zone management came to Falmouth and wanted to dump dredge spoils off of West Falmouth Harbor, we didn't set up a subcommittee. We got out there and we fought it and we stopped it. They gave us a direct environmental impact report. Dr. Hampson, a number of scientists got together, we reviewed it, and we ended it. We didn't send this to committee. We stood up as a town for our environment, and that's I don't think we can lose sight of that. We didn't bring dredge spoils over here from New Bedford Harbor. Why would we now bring animals from a similar situation and bring them in here or trivialize the issues?
Mr. Chairman, the report that Chuck's talking about was actually voted and approved. The group to fight that was approved by the Board of Selectmen. It wasn't a group that organized themselves and fought it by themselves. So all things being equal, this is government, and we're elected officials, and we're elected bodies. And in this case, we need to talk things through. No one, again, as I'm saying, is doing a shellfish relay until it's approved by the Board of Selectmen, period. At least, I don't think that's happening, and we haven't moved that forward.
If I may,
Mhm.
all these letters, which I read over the weekend, which came in, and some came in just tonight, all mention shellfish relay. And I guess they say something in life like, don't assume. Well, I assumed, because we're talking about fisheries management, that this whole relay come under management and propagation. In all these letters, some of them from commercial shell fishermen, talk about the relay. And that's why it should be all, I think, discussed as one whole issue. I understand there's a second issue regarding staffing of shellfish warden or constable, which could be another issue we need to discuss, but all these letters, except for one, discuss the relay from both sides. So the state didn't want to show up, that's their prerogative, I guess. I mean, they've had emails evidently for 3 weeks and didn't wish to respond, so.
Well, my only concern about emails and not responding is that there's no guarantee that the email arrived in somebody's mailbox, that they either saw it, maybe it ended up in their junk box. I mean, we've had issues in the past where somebody sends an email and there's no guarantee of reception. You can be guaranteed if it doesn't get there, but there's no telling what happened on the other end of the communications, to be sure. I don't want to belabor this point. We have a motion and a second on the floor to take this discussion up, at least with regards to the relay, at another time. And I don't want to send all these folks home either, so I'm tending to agree with Mr. Murphy that this is going to be a multifaceted discussion that may occur over the course of a number of meetings. But at the very least, I think, Mr. Martinson, I appreciate your willingness to come this evening and make this presentation. But I think if we can keep the discussion focused on the management of the fisheries and hear from the members of the public who are here tonight for that purpose, we should take up the discussion of the relay at another time. So with that, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor of the motion to discuss the relay at another time? Aye?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Okay. The motion carries then. Mr. Martinson, I appreciate your time. Thank you for coming. I think we'll communicate with the chair that we're going to be scheduling this for another time. And hopefully we can get the State Fisheries Department here to review this on a more, as Mr. Murphy says, get everybody in the same room. And with that, I'll take comment from the audience, and please focus your comments on Mr. Brown's discussion regarding the shellfish management. If there's anyone here who would like to speak to that.
I can give some initial slides that might be helpful, if that would be helpful. There are some at the end. It's kind of our entire program. I discuss it at the beginning, and then we come back to it at the end. So it's got its arms around it. So if you'd like me to give a section of it, I could try.
Okay. Well, we'll start with the folks from the audience. We'll see where this takes us. I saw a hand in the back. If you could just identify yourself when you come to the microphone. We may know who you are, but our recording secretary may not.
Yeah, Jay Queenan, Falmouth Shell Fisherman. I'm kind of reading this too, kind of know what this. But as far as a warden goes, I think we need a warden from outside the DNR, not controlled by the DNR. It hasn't worked for 10 years, hasn't worked. You know, strictly a shellfish full-time warden with a part-time grower. You know, with a desire to do the job. I mean, they hired Paul Montague. The guy wanted to be a warden. He was successful at it. We respected him for doing that. You saw him on the water all the time. I think that's what we got to go for. And the propagation, you know, and I've been told too not to go into this because of the fact that the state couldn't be here. I mean, they're explicit about that. But we haven't had a successful seed grow out in those 9 years. And so I thought if we did a propagation program that we have to buy seed that we can just put in the water, because it's not being grown successfully. And you know, 30 years, 35 years as a fisherman, we can't have a failure. There's not going to be next winter coming up. It's not going to be there. The whole place is just a horror show, a horror show. The other thing was the fact that this town isn't really doing their share as other towns are, like say Barnstable. The seed or relay, whatever they're having success with, the spat that they produce goes to other towns. Like you take Rhode Island takes care of its state, and if we're part of this state, we need to do our share to make shell fishing in the whole state better. And then, you know, I mean, I'm thinking the community suffers from this because of the, by not doing this, and I mean, I'm not pointing fingers at anybody, but I kind of am. We haven't done anything to propagate. So we got a water quality problem. And that's been spawned by this whole, let the shellfish take care of itself. I mean, I was fishing today. I mean, the house I'm looking at, there's not a tree on the property. That's a filtration system for groundwater. So your only thing that's going to filtrate, you know, that groundwater is shellfish. And the more the merrier, really, you know. And, the cohogs are what's going to work right off the bat. They're going to survive. And I thought, too, that the money was, maybe touched on it, but, you know, these other towns are taking their profits from fishing licenses and putting it directly back into the resource. And, I think one of the biggest things here is its jobs. I mean, the country's hurting for jobs. We're looking at potentially 50 families who are out of a job. All of a sudden, they're like, what are they going to do now? I mean, I've been fishing for 30 years, 35 years. My son's a fisherman. If he has a grandson, he's going to be a fisherman. I mean, I'm the first line in a 3-generation. And, you know, what do you tell your kids when you go, well, you know, we didn't do anything about this. We just let it die. And, you know, my granddaughter asked me, you know, when I grow up, can I be a fisherman on your boat? And, you know, what do you do? What do you look at her and say, well, you know, you're kind of lying, saying everything's fine when it's not. And the other thing that really, you know, kind of got me was that we haven't had any money spent. And you know, I mean, I don't know if I'm clear to talk about this, but we're supposedly giving a lot of money to a guy to grow oysters. And I've been fishing wild oysters for like 30 years, and they're not going to live in these ponds. The fish that we're trying to buy will. And, you know, it's like 19 years of money that we could have gotten if we're spending $13,000. You know what I mean? It would save the whole fishery. And you know, and the other thing that, you know, no one's being clear on is the fact that there's all these little, you know, how much water these animals pump. They're supposed to be 3.5 inches. They don't live to that size in shellfish grants. They're not. I'm in a shellfish grant right now, and they're not taking 3-inch oysters out of that grant. And in fact, there isn't an oyster that was spawned in that grant that they harvest. They buy them. So there's not, you know, there's not a generations of spat that's going to help down the road. It's all going to be a one-shot deal. You're going to pay somebody a lot of money to, you know, hopefully it works out. I don't think it's going to, personally. You know, the other thing is, you know, is like I said, I mean, this future is, you know, we can change it right now. You can do the right thing, or at least try to. And as far as, you know, nobody kicked Chuck out of the meeting in 10 minutes. That didn't happen. We've been trying to work together, and, you know, you got guys that are for this relay thing, which, again, we're going to talk about another time, and guys that aren't. But it is successful. And the seed that we've grown in town so far has just been a bust. So, anyways,
Just a couple questions. Before you go, my ignorance, what is spat? Is that the
That's juvenile shellfish, when it's born, it's in the water column.
Okay, secondly, did I hear you correctly when you said oysters will not live in our ponds? Is that-
Yeah.
You do realize that's one of the big alternatives we're looking at for waste?
I know that, but see, I fish in, I couldn't tell you where they live. They don't live in Green Pond, Great Pond, Wacoit Bay, Eel River. They live in Magansett, those two rivers in Magansett. They live in Quistit Harbor. There's a small set in Falmouth Harbor, West Falmouth Harbor. These ponds where they're gonna go, they don't live there. They just don't live there. And I've been told by Galen Barlow, what am I talking about? Olin Kelly, that he's never had a spat of oysters from that grant. He's had that grant for, 50 years? They do not live there. They won't survive in those ponds because they don't live there now. And I mean, that's just, I have nothing to lose or gain by saying that, because if I could go get a limit of oysters every day, I stand to gain. I'm only saying it because I'm positive it's not gonna work. I know where there's spat, juveniles in Wacoit Bay, but they don't live, they don't survive. I've found spots where the grass is all set up with them, and you go, wow, geez, if you could move those and get them to live, but they just don't take. I'm dredging in that grant with a scallop dredge. I'm fairly good at that, and I've gotten 50 in a month and a half of leftovers. There's no small oysters, so. It's like I said, it's not gonna happen. If it was a controlled experiment in Little Pond, stayed in Little Pond, the guy who's gonna grow these, or the team that's gonna grow them, use their own money. Because the one thing I'll say about the guy in Wacoit is he's using his own money. If he fails, that's his hide he's paying with. He's not getting that kind of money, on a whim that, well, I hope it's gonna work. And my feeling is, the quahogs, you can't kill them. I dug some the other day, there was like somebody threw a gas filter, and they were alive. I threw them back in, but, they'll live in anything. And, nobody's even talked about the fact that a 3.5-inch oyster pumps this much water. Well, what does an equal-sized quahog pump? Are we talking about, there's like 3 little necks to 1 big oyster. So there's a lot of, things that, well, we've figured this out in the fish tank, and, 35 years, 8 hours, 6 days a week, 12 months a year. I know what I'm talking about.
Anyone else?
Yeah, my name is John Perry. I'm a commercial fisherman, and I was around when George Souza was there, and we said we weren't going to bring up the relay, and I know, but I just want to let you guys know it's not new to Falmouth. It was done back in the 60s, so I'm going to let that go as it was. When Paul Montague was here, we had what we call the Shellfish Advisory Board, and I was part of it, and we used to meet at the harbor. And what we did is we helped in trying to regulate enough shellfish for the commercial guys, the family people, so that everybody's happy. I've seen things go downhill, and I'm scared. And that's all I want to say. I think we need to really look. I think Chuck is doing a good job, but it's not a one-man's job. It really, just to grow quahogs. Just to grow quahog is a 40-hour week. And one guy can't do that and ride around and check this person's house because it's under conservation and all that. So I think we need to get together so everybody can make a living for the new young kids who want to get out there and make money. And the family people. Let's not forget about the family people. When we set up, West Falmouth for the family area, we set up Bourne's Pond. I hear Bourne's Pond might not open for the family people. These are just things we got to start to recognize, that the family people, 2,000 licenses, the 75 family commercial licenses. That's close to $80,000 a year, and we were working on a budget of $13,000. I think it's something to be looked at. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Mr. Chairman?
Mhm.
Can I just ask a question before we get any more?
Sure.
Probably best served to maybe ask Chuck. Do you know the number of recreational permits we have in the town, the number of commercial permits, and what is the cost for each of those?
That was actually in the presentation, if you'd like me to give that.
If you can
We'll
tell us,
answer
yeah.
all that.
Yeah,
But
you can.
yeah, the number, roughly, you're looking at 2,000 recreational, and then you're looking somewhere on the order of, I believe it's this year, we're at 75.
And the
Commercial.
cost, without me looking up ballpark, what they
Yeah,
would
it
charge?
costs, you're $50 for, I'm sorry, $80 for non-resident, $40 for resident, $5 for seniors, and $300 for commercial. And a lot of that's covered in the presentation, which we can not talk about contaminated relays and get to a lot of this other stuff.
Mr. Martinson, while you're there, and George, I saw you, I'll get you next. Regarding the question about oyster survival, my understanding is that oysters, they're not going to survive anyway, that there's something about them that you have to propagate them with spat, and that you have to harvest them or else they will eventually die off, that they won't naturally propagate, and that's a problem all along the East Coast.
Oysters need calcium carbonate a calcium carbonate structure to attach to when they're in their juvenile larvae stage. So if that calcium carbonate's not available readily in the system, then they won't. So if you have a system, say, that the bottom is anoxic and you don't have the carbonate available from shell as it turns over, you're not going to have oysters just show up there on their own. That's why we have a local law that says you actually have to return your oyster shells back to the ponds after you eat them, so that more oysters can attach to them.
While I still have you there, I have heard, and, could be misinformation, that most of the seed that we put out there from our upwellers won't reproduce. Is that in fact true?
If you just hang on one moment, please. Actually, I have an email to that effect. It came from Richard Krause, where I asked him to comment on the rumor that cork seed does not spawn. And
Who's Richard Krause?
Richard Krause is the owner of Aquacultural Research Corporation in Dennis. And I don't think I need to go further, but he said, this notion could not be further from the truth. They all spawn. They're all spawners. Yeah, so we get them from there. They come in genetically marked, so when we actually go out and look, a certain percentage, roughly 5% of the shellfish, depending on the year, are genetically marked. And we know from year to year which, the percentages of genetic markers on there. It's called notata. So we can actually go up, and if there's, 3 or 4 notata in a group of shellfish in a basket, we know that roughly that represents 5% of what was marked. So you can do the math very simply and see how much shellfish in a basket came from our system. We grow roughly 2 million cohogs a year. We've almost doubled our growing capacity in the town in the last 8 years. We had a $10,000 donation from McDougall's Marine. They provided an upweller to the town of Falmouth, and it was really one of the first public-private partnerships that ever existed in aquaculture as far as having shellfish grow at a marina. That is entirely run by our volunteer group. We have 15 volunteers that volunteer throughout the summer weekly. And McDougall's Marine, it should not go without mentioning, McDougall's Marine and this one upweller that we have actually pays for the electricity and pays for the maintenance on the upweller, and there's no sunset on that. They're going to be doing that for as long as McDougall's Marine is there. So it was a way to add an upweller to the program and not have any additional cost to the town of Falmouth.
Just to follow up, you say we grow 2 million. What is the mortality rate on that?
Right. So the mortality depends on a number of different things. Obviously, the size that we put it out. We put them out. What we do is we grow them and sieve them and move them into grow-out trays in West Falmouth in a green pond. You might have often seen the buoys out there, the orange buoys. It can be the mortality can be, I would have to really look at some literature reviews, but I would say probably you're looking at, off the top of my head, from very start to finish, maybe a 15 or 20% mortality at the maximum. It certainly goes down the larger the shellfish are when you put them in the system, just because they're larger animals.
Is there a way for us to be able to grow them till they get to be a larger size, so the mortality rate is not as high?
Yeah, what we do now is we put them in cages. We have, roughly 70 or 80 cages. Certainly more cages would help.
I mean, we're trying to...
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, there's a number of things. There's 5 points that I had, solutions to move forward from here that were in the presentation. But certainly, a lot of other towns do have a model where they have a technician that just focuses on growing shellfish. And, we do have a part-time technician now that just does herring work with us. And many of you might know there's a possibility that herring could be listed as a more protected species than it already is in the future. So obviously we'll have some stresses on us if that happens for a local resource. So that, a model where we could have maybe a summer technician or a seasonal technician 6 months out of the year to do that certainly would be helpful. It'd be remiss to say that I'm not torn 100 different ways in my job. I think you guys all know that, right now I'm doing the job of the shellfish constable and the acting director of natural resources, and it's nonstop. I mean, it's again, like you said, the shellfish constable's job alone is a lot. The assistant director's job is a lot, but having both right now is very challenging. Getting things in place there would be very helpful. Another thing that was brought to our attention was from Dr. George Hampson, who's here this evening, and that's offshore, or off our shores, bringing in relay cohogs from within town. And these are resources that already exist in our community. We used a number of commercial shell fishermen about 4 or 5 years ago when there was a rain closure. We actually paid them to help us harvest shellfish out of Little Pond and relay those in town. The shell fishermen would ordinarily have not have been working had we not have paid them to relay the shellfish, and then they subsequently were able to harvest the shellfish. And it wasn't, it was on the order of, I think the whole total program was 70 or 80 bushels, because we did it with AmeriCorps Cape Cod as well. It's certainly not on the magnitude of how you could do with dredging, but we've certainly, in a number of instances, worked with the commercial community to try to further the resource for the town.
And maybe this wouldn't be the right question to ask to Chuck before maybe it would be the right question to talk to the town manager and assistant town manager. I'd like to be able to direct the town manager to be able to give us a little bit of a history on George Sousa and how many years he served. And then, in fact, Paul Montague. I remember Paul Montague, but, sometimes we lose track of how long ago these people were here. And then, if the rough numbers here, we're looking at quite a bit of income that we're taking in for permits, and if we're making a very limited investment back into this resource, I think we're all talking about the types of scenarios of our beaches and our waterways. I know it's on the selectmen's priority list that our beaches and waterways, and this doesn't just affect commercial shellfish, recreation. We have 2,000 people who have a recreational license. I mean, that's a pretty good number. So we want to make sure that they're not just buying it and never being able to get anything. But for us to have the history, I think it would be important to let us know, how long ago was Paul Montague here? I mean, and when was the last day he was here? Chuck took it over, I know. But, was that just one of those things that, I need some institutional memory is what I'm asking. And
I think, it's been a while since we had a dedicated workshop, and I'm beginning to see that between what we've discussed here tonight, the questions about shellfish relays, the resources for shellfish, I'm sure there's a whole discussion that we can have, and we did have a coastal resources workshop, I think a year and a half ago. It probably would be a good idea to have a workshop, and we could probably devote an entire evening to the discussion of the shell fishery, its maintenance, and the future. And especially in light of the fact that there, as Mr. Braga noted, there's discussions about how aquaculture, oyster aquaculture, can play into the question of addressing the nitrogen issue. So perhaps we should be, we'll communicate that to the chair and see if we can't get that on an agenda, and perhaps get everybody involved and have a complete workshop where we can all, Mr. Murphy, you suggested getting everybody to the table. I think that would probably be a good idea, and do it here in this forum, as the board has done in the past with some workshop items. I think I'd like to give Mr. Hampson an option. We're starting to run over on our time here, so.
I just want to say one last thing, if I may.
Yes, sir.
I think the majority of the concerns of the commercial community are similar concerns of mine, and there's a lot of middle ground here. Really, the only middle ground that we didn't have was a contaminated relay, which is the reason why we brought it in front of you guys to make that decision. So, we've always had an open door policy, as most of the fishermen here will tell you. You can call me anytime, and I'll pick up the phone pretty much and speak with you. So there is a lot of middle room here, and I'm encouraged by that. Thank you.
Mr. Hampson?
George Hampson, Precinct 5. That's a joke. I was going to give a little bit of information about some of the ways in which we lose shellfish, but with all due respect, Mr. Chairman, if you have that session that you suggested, then maybe it would be a good time to talk about that, because it all comes down to water quality. Good water quality, we'd have shellfish. The trouble is, every year, we have seed, it starts to grow. Come into May now, not even June, and then they start dying. I've been in water quality for 15 years, and I see it every year, the shellfish, open shells, in different places. But where the water quality is good, you have a chance. So with that, I will give my talk later on, if you don't mind. Okay?
Mr. Chairman, can I ask one last question? Maybe Chuck could answer this, or even you, George. You might be able. We've often talked in our discussions about cleaning our embayments about oysters. Do cohogs do the same type of cleansing as an oyster?
Go ahead, Chuck. Oysters is probably
Yeah, oysters certainly do a more rapid job, the most rapid job being done by mussels. And then oysters, there is certainly a value attached to the oysters, which is higher than the value attached to the cohogs at the end of the day. And yes, they do naturally attenuate nutrients.
Well, can I ask one other question? That's a great question. I mean, I never realized mussels, but when I was a kid in Falmouth, mussels were everywhere. They were on every rock, every jetty, and on every dock, and I rarely see them anymore. Is there a reason for that, and is there something we can do to promote that side of the industry as well?
Water quality is an issue. One of the largest mussel kills, die-offs we had was back in when Paul was here in 2002 to 2003, off of Little Island. There was a large bed out there that died, and the beach was literally blue and black with the broken shells, and there's a layer that still exists there. So, another interesting thing is that a lot of the shellfish, or some of the shellfish that are not harvested, such as razor clams, there's no market for razor clams. Anyone in this room will tell you there were more razor clams 20 years ago than there are now. And it's not a matter of seeding razor clams or not, it's that the environment just isn't there to support them. When you have these low oxygen events, over a few day period, you can lose literally hundreds of bushels of shellfish, suffocating.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Finnan, can we keep it brief, because we're running into our next agenda, several of our next agenda items.
Hi, Mark Finneran, Trotting Park Road. I've attended almost every wastewater meeting, and it's kind of become a hobby of mine. And I just learned this evening that part of the water quality in our embayments is due to the fact that the management of the town didn't maintain, the shellfish constable position. And I think in the interest of all that openness, maybe we should have this as some sort of a workshop where it can be in front of the public, the once-a-month workshops might be in order. Just a suggestion. Thanks.
Last comments?
Matt Weeks, Tea Ticket. I'm an oyster grower. And to the theory that was presented before as far as oysters not being able to grow in salt ponds, I don't think that's true. I grew 12,000 oysters last year in Buzzards Bay where they weren't supposed to grow. Duxbury never had oysters until the guys started farming them. Now it's a multi-million-dollar industry. If you look back at the reports in 1909, there were no quahogs in these ponds either until the town started planting them. So I think once you start planting them, they'll grow.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you. Folks, we're going to move on to our next agenda item, but as the board noted, we'll probably have a workshop on this. It looks like there's enough interest and enough information that needs to be discussed.
Can I make a motion that we do have a workshop on this?
Sure.
So that we put it in the form of a motion so they know that we'll discuss everything at that time?
If you'd like.
Make a motion that we have a workshop in the near future on this within the next 3 months.
Okay.
Absolutely, and have the right, Concom, or the shell fishermen and DNR and everyone else.
Do you want to second that motion?
I'll second it, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll pause briefly as everyone leaves the room. And for those of you staying, I'll remind you all, please, if you have a cell phone, turn it off or silence it. All right, next item on our agenda is discussion and vote to designate poet laureate. We have a proposal to designate one of Falmouth's residents, Adelaide Cummings, as poet laureate for the town.
Shall I speak to that?
Yes, sir. Could you identify yourself for the record, please?
I'm Jerry Fanger, Cliff Road, West Falmouth.
Good evening.
And I've known Adelaide Cummings for some 17 years, but she's lived here a lot longer than that. She's about to be 98 years old in a matter of a few weeks. She's written extensively, 6 books of poetry, working on another one now. Hopes to have that published by her birthday. She has been an editor of Child Life. She wrote extensively. She wrote a column called Zoos Who's, and which was very well received as a satire on political events a number of years ago. It's a long history of that. And she's been a great favorite of the town, great tennis player, and a real Southern lady. I once had a backhand cut to her, and she couldn't get anywhere near it because it cut way away. She came up to the net and said, "Jerry, have you no friends?" So she has a wonderful sense of humor. And I hope you'll give favorable consideration to the thought that we have a poet laureate, and that it be Adelaide Cummings. Be a great event for her 98th birthday.
Any discussion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I know that over the years, specifically back when my first 2 terms as a selectman before I took a little hiatus, I do remember receiving some poems, handwritten poems from her, and in my discussions with the chief of police, when we unveiled the new, for a better term, SWAT vehicle, we were discussing poems, and he was telling me about her, and specifically how she writes him a poem every now and then still to this day. So I think it would be a nice tribute, and I don't know if any other board members have ever seen some of the handwritten poems that she has actually sent to us, but I think it could be appropriate, it should be appropriate to do something nice like this.
So we have a proposed proclamation. Do we want to make that a motion?
Sure, I make a motion that we designate Adelaide Cummings as our poet laureate of the town of Falmouth. Do you want to read that, David?
Oh, sure.
I'll second that.
Yep. Whereas Adelaide Anderson Cummings of the village of West Falmouth in the town of Falmouth has been writing poetry as a Falmouth resident for many years, and whereas Adelaide Anderson Cummings has written many poignant poems relating to character, values, literature, life, and history, and has won the Barnes and Noble Prize for Poetry, and whereas the Board of Selectmen has accepted the nomination of Adelaide Anderson Cummings as the town's poet laureate to express our collective appreciation for her efforts to support, sustain, and nurture poetry and literature, and whereas the town of Falmouth may call upon its poet laureate to compose poems for the town occasions worthy of commemoration, and whereas the town of Falmouth poet laureate is an honorary position carrying with it the esteem and appreciation of Falmouth citizens, and now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Selectmen of the town of Falmouth, on behalf of the town and its residents, on this day appoint Adelaide Anderson Cummings as poet laureate of the town of Falmouth to hold such office until a successor shall be duly appointed.
So we have a motion and a second?
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. Thank you very much.
If you could ask her to send us a poem after she gets this, it'd be wonderful. We could read it into the record.
Sure you will. Watch out. Yes, this is. Thank you.
All right, next item on our agenda is a discussion and vote on proposed remote participation policy for public bodies. We have a draft policy which was provided by town council. Any discussion from the board?
I don't always like to be the one to lead these off.
If you'd like, I will.
Yeah, why don't you?
Well, we had this discussion a few months ago, and I expressed some reservations about a remote participation. I know that the open meeting law allows it, but there are obviously some issues that need to be resolved. I think more importantly, there's the public perception of the policy. I guess this actually allows for, remember, participating remotely shall not count to determine the quorum, so they would still have to have a quorum present.
Yeah, it just talks about.
The chair acting shall distribute through remote innovate copies of documents have to be distributed. I guess one of the questions that I have with this policy is that it does say that remote participation shall be achieved through telephone, internet, or satellite-enabled audio or video conferencing. And then it says when video technology is used, the participant shall be clearly, the remote participant shall be clearly visible to all persons present at the meeting location. And that the public body shall determine by a majority of vote of members present that which technology may be used by its members. I guess there's a few questions here about if we do allow this, what would the cost of the technology be? And,
Actually, Mr. Chair, if I may, I don't want to, I'm big on policy. I really would wonder if we can discuss this with the full board before we make any type of, I know there's two members missing tonight, and I'd like to have their input as well, but it's at your discretion, being the chairman.
Well, we don't have to take any action on this evening, and certainly we could ask the chair to put it on a future agenda when all members are present.
Go ahead.
Well, I voiced my concern the last time. I know that when some of us are not able to make it, that we wish that we could be based on geography. However, life goes on no matter what might happen. And sometimes I think that this would provide an easy way out for folks not making the extra effort to actually come to a meeting. I think people deserve the ability to be able to look people in the eye, be able to look at them and say, this is what I'm having to say to you, this is how I'm going to say it, right, wrong, or indifferent. For us, sometimes you have to come to the plate, and it's a hard position. And I will also say that this would include regulatory bodies. I mean, the way that this is written, it could be via the telephone, and people would not see body language, they would not see what's going on in the room. We're having enough problems, I think, right now, living by the letter of the law with the open meeting law that's currently, and I think that this would be something that would be a real challenge. Just my point is that I think that people also need to be able to look at you, meaning the people on these boards and committees, and see your body language and see whether they need to ask you a question or answer a question. When we leave and actually close the hearing is closed. We can't take any additional public comment. So if there was something that they didn't get, or the person who's remotely, they might ask another member of the board, and that's really not fair to the public. And I think that's an important part. I know that there are times, that I take a vacation, and I know there's an agenda item coming up, and I missed 2 meetings this past year, and I do every effort to be able to make it every meeting, but it is what it is, and maybe Mr. Braga is right in the sense that when there's a big issue like this, we might want to wait for the entire board. We all would hope that if that were the case. But just by merely saying that we can remotely participate, I think that's the easy way out. I don't think the public really voted for us to be able to do that. I think they wanted us to show up and to actually look people in the eye and make decisions one way or the other. So that's my 2 cents worth in there.
Fair enough. I mean, it's at your discretion, whatever.
Well, if you folks want to put a motion on the floor or not,
I make a
like I said,
motion
we don't have to.
so that we're all here, we know what some people's thoughts are, but this would be one of those issues that we're going to set a policy moving forward that I don't have a problem with making a motion to continue this discussion at a future meeting.
Okay.
Maybe next week, put it on next week's agenda.
There's nothing, the week after.
The week after, 2 weeks from today.
I'll second it.
All right.
A date specific for the 23rd, if there's,
Yes, that would be my motion.
if there's room on the agenda. Thank you.
So a motion and a second to reschedule this to April 23rd. All right. Any last discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. And we have 5 minutes, so why don't we attack the summary of actions? Let's see if anyone wants to hold, actually, why don't we just go through these one at a time, because there's, at least half of these are probably going to be held. So, number 1 is approved request for a wedding permit, Barry and Young, Old Silver Beach, September 22, 2012. A motion to approve?
I make a motion to approve.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Unanimous. All right. Approved wedding permit request, Menley and Zolo, Bristol Beach, August 4, 2012. Any questions?
I do, Mr. Chairman. There are 2 weddings that same day at that same beach.
Oh.
And I'm looking for it, but, the beach superintendent didn't have a problem with that, but we're taking a fee from these folks, and I think with all due justice, that we should let the folks know that there is already a wedding there, and that it might behoove them to pick another beach.
so do we want to continue this? And
I would ask that we continue this, notify the applicant that there is in fact a wedding there may be some conflicts, and that give them the option to look for another beach.
All right, so.
So that's my motion.
All right. Second. Okay, motion and a second to continue this so that the applicant understands that there's another wedding previously scheduled at the same date and time. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So if the town manager office could accomplish that?
Okay. Item 3, approve request for one-day liquor license, Fresh Pond Holy Ghost Society. Actually, we have 3 one-day liquor licenses, is what it looks like.
So if I may do my disclosure before we go to that, I'm the holder of an all-alcoholic seasonal liquor license. Thank you.
Okay, we have for June 23 and 24 and August 25, all of 2012.
So move.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
And we have approving a license, one-day liquor license, Master Singers by the Sea, St. Barnabas Parish Hall, April 21 and 22, 2012.
I did a blanket disclosure, but I'll move that. So move.
Second.
Motion and a second, discussion. All those in favor? Aye.
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 All right, approved payment from the beach account.
Can I ask a question? I see these all wood lumber. Does the manager's office know what they were using all these?
Was it ramp? Wasn't it something to do with handicap ramp? I think I learned in the beach committee meeting.
Stone.
I believe it may be, but I don't have that with absolute certainty. Be happy to get back to the board with that if
But I can say, I was at the last beach committee meeting. They had a lot to do with a ramp.
Okay. So I make a motion to approve, but in the future, if we can have, we're just looking at a lumber bill, know what those things are for.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve.
Second.
And a second. Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. And it is now 8:45, so we'll stop here because there's a couple of other items here that may require some additional discussion. All right, and next on our agenda then, a report from the Community Preservation Committee. We have the draft RFP for Spring Bars Road. Mr. Chairman?
Thank you, Mr. Putnam. I'm Peter Clark, Chairman of the Community Preservation Committee, and we're pleased to be here to start to look at this RFP and to work together on moving toward an effective development here. I just remind you of the origins. Town meeting purchased the property at Spring Bars Road on April 2010 town meeting with the explicit purpose of having both conservation land and land for housing. Those are 2 of the 4 main missions of the Community Preservation Committee from which the money comes. Of the 22 acres, approximately, or 20 acres, 21, a little over 9 is under conservation restriction, and the other 11 plus are for other purposes, housing, recreation, and things that the CPC can spend its money on. Starting in April 2010, the CPC began to discuss this, and in the last 8 months, we've been working hard to work on the parameters of an RFP to bring that draft to you and to then discuss it with you. We were charged with kind of developing the parameters, but we know that, and we look forward to talking with you about them. We worked with a number of people. I want to point out that Laura Schufelt from Mass Housing Partnership, who has done a tremendous work here with the Falmouth Housing Authority and Housing Corporation, is now with Mass Housing Partnership, and she has worked over 6 months, I think, something like that, with us on this process. Deborah Converse, the Community Preservation Planner, is here. Patty Haney and Barb Schneider were chairs of two subcommittees that worked very hard on it. And we have Ken Buckland and Sandy Cuney, also members of the committee. So tonight our purpose was to review the major parameters with you, so at least you know what they are, and to ask you to meet with us again in early May to review those. After some considerable discussion with Mr. Suso and Ms. Harper, we feel that because of the size and the basic new enterprise that this is for the town, we should be recommending another look from an outside consultant or agency to review progress to date, to work with the thoughts of the Board of Selectmen and CPC, and also to advise on next steps. So I hope to take that to this Thursday's meeting of CPC, and we hope we'll bring back a recommendation that out of Falmouth Affordable Housing Funds, we can, as you did with the golf course, get a consultant who knew that area of business very well. Laura knows it very well, and she has helped us with it. I think that we're going to find that we've made a very good start on the basic parameters. But I think it's worth taking another look. So that's a suggestion that I'll be taking to the Community Preservation Committee. So then, if you will, I'll take a look. We'll walk through some of the basic parameters and at least mention them to you. Happy to answer questions, but if I spend all the time trying to summarize our thinking on it, you're going to be here a very long time. The first is that we are recommending a long-term lease of a little over 11 acres. We did not recommend a sale to the developer, partly because we felt the town wanted to own that property, partly because we felt it gave us, the town, a little leverage in terms of management issues. But it does take a careful land development agreement. There's one attached that has been used by MHP and has been reviewed by the Inspector General and things of that sort. But I think it's important to spend a good time to make sure that's just the way the town wants it. So one issue is lease or sale, long-term lease or sale of the property. We're suggesting that long-term lease is a preference, but again, that's open for discussion. The second area is that this RFP is about the construction and management of 20 to 30 units, is what we say on page 4, a maximum of 70 bedrooms. And that number was arrived at very early in the process in reaction to wanting to put housing there, but not wanting it to be at all threatening, wanting it to be a very manageable development in the context of any impact on the sensitive environment there. But we see no town involvement. It's important to structure the LDA so that's clear. So that's number 2. 20 to 30 units, maximum of 70 bedrooms, construction and management by the person who responds to the RFP or the team. Third, on page 5, we talk about a 40B process, either regular or friendly, as the developer chooses, as it works out with the town. And that's to give the developer flexibility to design structures in the way it makes most sense to do that. So that's another suggestion we're seeing as important. And I hope you'll interrupt me, my cohorts here, if there's anything that I need to add. The next area is that these units should be rental rather than purchase, and that they should be affordable and kept that way by deed restriction in perpetuity. Now, we discussed rental and sale quite a bit. We've looked at all kinds of data relative to housing needs, and the rental seemed the way to go in terms of the needs in the town. But that we spent a lot of time talking about that. It's focused, and this is another subset of this parameter, on households with income in the range of 30 to 80% of area median income. Now, we've argued long and hard about that, too. Should we try to stretch it to 100%? Shouldn't we? And essentially, there are two things that drive a focus on 60 plus or minus. One is that to make this economically feasible, you have to have tax credits. And to get tax credits, there are requirements about the percentages of people in various income groups. And that focuses on 60. The second factor is that market rates at about 80 or just about 80 begin to match the affordable rates. So you don't seem to have a need to go there. Whereas you do, at 80 and below, you do have a situation in which the affordable rates governed by the laws on affordability fall below the market rates more and more significantly. There was a figure given of $850 a month rental at 60% area median income. But that's for a studio apartment. We're building 2 and 3 bedroom apartments. The rentals for those are $200, $300, $400 more than the $850. At least as of 2011, it was $1,180 for a 2 bedroom rental and $1,281 for a 3 bedroom rental. So, affordable rental and for households in that group. Now, looking at our discussions around design guidelines, we've included language that I think is important for the town to be thinking about, that this have a positive impact on that community. It's a major investment, and we want it to have a positive impact, of course. We want it to be a model. And so that's in there on page 3. We've left the number of structures open. On page 3, we say that it is open, except that we and you say it can't be one large building. Now, again, whether you want to live with that guideline or exclude any particular configuration of the units is certainly up for discussion. But we essentially feel that if you want to get the best use of passive solar or other kinds of energy uses, you probably are looking at more than one building. And by and large, one massive building of 30 units didn't seem to fit that neighborhood and fit the neighborhood requirements. On page 4, we have talked about keeping the structures in a Cape Cod style, in a vernacular like the rest of the neighborhood. And we have cited particular Cape Cod Commission documents that help to define the parameters of that. Now again, those still have flexibility, so we're not tying the developer's hands, we don't feel. Next, I'd like to mention that the highest possible energy efficiency is a phrase that we have used throughout. Page 4, page 8, page 11, in the evaluation criteria at the end, there's a very strong emphasis on the notion that for these units to be affordable for people, they can't become the victim of rising electricity and gas or oil prices. And that we want whoever takes this development on to be working very hard to use energy-saving systems, not only in the structure of the building, but in perhaps the kinds of appliances and other things that would be there. The next that we felt very strongly about is that it should meet green building principles. That was part of our original memorandum of understanding with you, and it's stated here again several times. Now, something that we discussed long and hard was, if you're assessing the responses to our RFP, you have to have some well-understood and quantifiable system to measure that against. And having worked long and hard at the language on that, you will find on page 8 the language that we decided to use, which is that it should be certifiable by LEED standards or comparable, whether the developer wants to use HERS ratings or other kinds of recognized systems. But we want them to come to us with a development that can be measured against one of those recognized standards. With LEED, we exempted existing site conditions because that is a unique site, and site has a considerable contribution to LEED scoring, and we didn't feel it was fair to force a developer to meet the kind of site condition parts of LEED. So you'll find that language in there as a recommendation from us on page 8. And I'll just hit a couple of other things. Unit design, we want 10% handicapped accessible, which is more than the required minimum. And we want all of them to be visitable if possible. Utilities. What we have in there will certainly have to be altered as a result of the action on Article 22. But the important elements are that delivering water, the water main system will need review and perhaps work or replacement addition by the developer. And the wastewater system, whatever it is, has got to meet a net zero contribution, which has been dictated by the DEP for that pond and that area. So there may be ways to do that, various ways to do that. We had, as you know, recommended a sewer because it seemed to us the only way to meet that DEP requirement, or at least the most effective and efficient way to do it, the most predictable way to do it. Finally, a couple of things. Landscaping, there's a section on page 5 that talks about low-impact landscaping and the need to work in accordance with Conservation Commission jurisdiction over the wetlands. And we hope to have, again, a landscaping system that does not require much water, that is very effective in terms of types of runoff and things of that kind. On page 3, we want you to take a look at a paragraph there that talks about the fact that CPC and Board of Selectmen, and again, it's written there that we both, and we've got to talk about that. In pursuit of a model project, we are willing to entertain a funding request from CPC, a subsidy from CPC to help with this development. And we've earmarked there 3, I think it is, reasons. One is affordability, one is energy efficiency, and the other is green building standards, I believe. I can look it up for you. We would probably want to add in there the system to protect the pond with net zero contribution, whatever that might be, that we would look at those areas. We and the Board of Selectmen would be ready to use some of our funds to help the developer in this way. And there are conditions around that, but we certainly have to take a look and make sure that you're comfortable with those. So that essentially sums up some of the major types of discussions we had, decisions that we made. There are 4 pages that define the credentials that a developer or manager ought to have. There are pages 6 through 10. Involves providing us with a critical path for the development. And that was an addition of desire, I think an important one, that the town manager's office had wanted stated explicitly in there. Now, there's a 4-page rubric in the back that captures those things and tries to sketch them out over a 4-part assessment process. It's very important to have those understandable and measurable to defend your selection of a developer. And in discussion with Heather Harper and Mr. Suso, we also understand that there would be a review team that would be reviewing the proposals and making a decision. We would hope to have, if it's a 5-member team, the CPC would like to have a couple of members on that. And the other selection, I think, has to represent expertise that you'd like to have there as well. Now, all of this then is presented to you as our hard thinking, well argued. We've looked at all of the LEED kinds of credentialing processes. We've looked at the DHCD minimum building guidelines, which we proposed, which aren't attached to your document but are referenced there. It's a complex, if we'd given you all the attachments, it would have been a daunting pile. Let me ask people whether they would like to add to things that I've said here at all. If so, you've got to step up here to do that. Is that all right?
Actually, if we could, why don't we see if there's any questions from the board, and we'll go from there.
Good, and others may step up to answer them.
Anyone?
I do have a couple of questions. Is it intended that the actual developer would be the manager of the project? And in your RFP, I didn't see it, but it might be there that we're going to tie the two together. So in other words, someone's not going to just answer the RFP and try to drop it off as a manager.
That's right, and that's defined on page, well, let's see, let's look at page 6. Starts at bottom of page 5 with number 7, Management and Maintenance Plan, in which we are setting out some expectations for the long-range management of this project. And as you look on page 6 at the proposer and development team, you will see that the developer may not be an experienced manager, but they must bring to us a description of the team that will include someone that has extensive management experience, not only the physical management, but the client management of the development, so that you will see, we will all want to see the credentials that show that they have those skills in their team.
So it may not necessarily be the same person that actually develops it will be the person who manages it. They will bring forward the team, but they may not be one and the same.
If they don't have that expertise within their own organization, it says here they've got to show us and bring us the resumes and the credentials of the people who would do that, I think. Or does it also talk about how they would select them? Laura, welcome to the podium.
Good evening. My name is Laura Schufelt, and I'm the Community Assistance Manager at Mass Housing Partnership. And I assisted the CPC in putting together this draft RFP. I think, to your point, Mr. Murphy, the developer is anticipated to be there for the long haul. So if they're not the actual manager, they would have to hire a manager, but they would be the owner moving forward. I think that that's the question you're asking.
That actually answers my question, because I'm a little fearful of someone being the builder
And flipping
taking
it.
some shortcuts and then flipping it off to some
Right.
management company who's going to end up living with what in fact the product was that was built.
Understandable. In this, the developer maintains ownership
Okay.
throughout.
Great. If I can ask a couple of other things. The subsidy, I think that's an area that needs to be discussed, only because it's kind of showing your hand. We'll subsidize the project, so everyone's going to ask that it be subsidized. Maybe the first go-round on an RFP would be, let's see what people are going to respond back. We're trying to get the best bang for our buck, meaning we're trying to be able to leverage the funds that we have. If we don't originally put it in an RFP, my thoughts would be that we'll see whether or not someone comes in, whether they can make the project work with just the tax credits. We understand tax credits are what makes the world go round, if anyone's following it. So that's an area for discussion, but I just want to throw that out there. I don't know how much you've discussed that.
We've discussed it at length, and specifically wanting to encourage a more than a standard construction affordable housing development, and wanting to have the green building standards and the high energy efficiency. The question was, do we indicate that we're willing to subsidize just those things kind of above the kind of normal construction, and you show us how and what the cost benefit is, or do we not offer it at all and see what we get the first time? I don't know whether, Barb, you want to?
Barb Schneider, Community Preservation Committee. For probably a year, this has been a discussion, and we have been very realistic. There is no way we are going to get anything but the lowest common denominator if we don't offer something toward this project. That's being realistic, and we have all faced that. So we've tried to think of ways to best incorporate that offer without showing an exact number, as it were. And so I hope you'll appreciate what we're saying to a builder or to a developer is, we really don't want this to be the best bang for the buck, because that would mean you might get nothing more than a rectangle with units, period, nothing else. We said to the town from day one, we wanted this to be state-of-the-art. We wanted it to show how you could live efficiently, energy-wise, and that's going to take a little extra money. So appreciate that where we're coming from is, again, the discussion comes back to the Community Preservation and the Board of Selectmen deciding that is a worthwhile expenditure of some community preservation money when someone asks us and shows us why it is. I hope that's where we're coming from mentally.
If I can draw your attention, I think it's the third page in from the back. If you have at the back of yours the evaluation rubric, the third page in is financial feasibility. And in that, in the categories that are there, we've tried to spell out some conditions. In unacceptable, we say there's an over-reliance on local subsidy without reasonable improvement in the quality. Under acceptable, we say adequate use of CPC fund request. And then highly advantageous, rather, is CPC funds highly leveraged with adequate cost benefit to the project. And the most advantageous is a minimum reliance on local subsidy, evidence of success, finding other subsidies. So we worried about it, and we tried to build some conditions in that would allow us to declare projects along the four categories.
A couple of other notes. Number one is I wholeheartedly support the idea of bringing in an outside consultant to take a look at this whole RFP process and, checks and balances in regard to that. And my ideal is that you're measuring twice and you're only going to cut once. The more people can get to the plate. My other question is, have you talked to actually any developers themselves in this community who would be the type of people that would be building projects like this? For the lack of better terms, is we had a Sally Griffin that was on our town building committee who knew the building industry back and forward and was very successful. Pat Callahan and John Scanlon. Some of them might not want to comment to help you or give their 2 cents worth because they might want to bid on this project and it would take them out. But my question is, have you reached out to people like that for their input? I know Laura is a wealth of information. I've seen her in action before, but I'm talking about people that would actually construct something like that.
We have had comments from some smaller builders, but we haven't engaged someone like John Scanlon or the Scanlon Construction because of the issue of eliminating them or skewing the selection process. I think we feel that Bob Murray and Laura with Bob Murray for all those years has had a lot of experience with the process from planning to construction. But the quick, clear answer is no, we haven't called a group together to have them take a look at this.
Okay. And then the last issue is that, I know that, it was brought up at town meeting. It's something that probably needs to be discussed, and that's in regard to the septic type of system, and as you're talking about, zero contribution. All along, I had been under the impression that anybody we passed, if we were doing a town sewer, because of the sewer bylaw, thought that they had to tie in. Those are some things we're going to have to look at, because whether or not we have the reserve capacity with what's going on with that plant and our permit, number one. Number two, after town meeting, having some discussion with Mr. Suso, he was formerly in Framingham where they had those type of pump stations, and they were owned by private developers, and I don't want to comment for him, but it was a wealth of information to find out that there are some successes and some not successes in that type of scenario. So I think we might want to have that discussion in a more open and public forum to make sure that we air out and move forward, that everyone can be on the same page the next time that comes up.
I think that we approach this from, and I don't disagree with you, I think those discussions are valuable. We approached it very wary of the experience in which Little Pond Landing was met with the DEP requirement. We don't see how these can be built except on slab because of the amount of fill that's necessary and the level of the land, and they're rental properties. So when you look at those three conditions, at least let me say, when you have the discussion about alternatives, those three conditions ought to be key parts of the discussion to decide what you can do and how you can do it.
And maybe it's not just that. I mean, I'm talking about gravity feed versus a pump station. You know, you might have to go deeper, but the town then doesn't have the exposure someday of having to take over a pump station. 6 to 1, half a dozen to another, but we need to make sure that we verbalize all of that.
It's certainly worth review. We had GHD, you know, and you approved the design and the studies of that, and yet it's good to go back and question those things.
Okay. Thank you. I'm all done, Mr. Chairman.
My question was answered. I'm all set. Thanks.
I just have the one comment in with respect to the number 5 item, the sewer and the town meeting vote. And I understand that in the past, the DEP has said 0 contribution. But I'm thinking that given the town meeting vote, given where we are in this process of addressing nitrogen in the embayments, that we should probably begin a discussion with the DEP and say, look, we've got this parcel. We'd like to use it as a model, an experiment. We might even be able to get some grant money from the DEP and say, if you can work with us, maybe we can allow some contribution from the development in exchange for using this as a model. And then when we talk about subsidies, that, you know, as the CPC was willing to put forth a proposal to subsidize the sewer connection up to $400,000, that maybe that kind of subsidy would be put towards some sort of alternate disposal of the waste, and go to the DEP and say, can you match this? Can we use this as part of the thing? So that the developer, whoever it may be, will know that that particular part of this development is going to be paid for, if you will. And then they can just focus on the energy efficiency, on the structure, on all of those other issues. And the question about the wastewater and how that will be done will be answered by whatever agreement we can come to with the DEP. I know this is not necessarily, and I've heard the various arguments against this, and I don't want to rehash them now, but I think we need to open that discussion with the DEP, because if we don't talk to them about it, we'll never, obviously, if you don't ask the question, you'll never know what the answer is going to be. And certainly, I think Falmouth is in a position to go forth to the DEP and say, look, folks, we're trying to do this, we're trying to address these issues. Everybody knows that the cost of sewers are high and getting higher. And all across the county, there's discussion about, you know, wastewater management and so on and so forth. But ultimately, nothing is going to happen if we can't afford it, because it all comes down to the almighty dollar. And if the DEP can help us out in this situation, you know, why not? But we'll never know if we don't ask, so.
One last thing. There's another alternative out there, and I've heard it hashed around, and it's kind of a blended alternative, if I might. Large pipe versus small pipe. And I don't know if you understand what I'm saying, but large pipe sewer systems takes everything, whereas a small pipe doesn't take the solids. The solids are act in a biological way so that they can break each other down. Of course, the nitrogen is in most of the liquid, and that's the small pipe alternative. So there might be something else to explore. I know that the wastewater committee has talked about that in certain parts of town. That could be a nice blended opportunity. Bottom line is, I don't want to micromanage that aspect of it. I think that if you flush it all out, and not using a bad term, there, that we can work that through.
And I think it's something that is worth looking at again. It's always worth more discussion. I think we need to realize that we're trying to find a developer to build this for us, and the developer has to live with whatever is there, whether it's an experiment or not. The question is whether developers want to take on that as part of building something.
Right, and that's why I say, let's have the discussion with the DEP, because ultimately, if they're willing to help us out in terms of whatever contributions might be allowed to the watershed, if they're willing to help us out in terms of maybe some grants to help with a pilot program or an experiment of sorts, that it might make a developer feel more comfortable. And we talk about providing subsidies in order to get a developer to sign on and get those things that we're looking for. I mean, let's face it, this is one of those things that we're looking for from a broader perspective of where we're going with wastewater management in the town. If we can get the DEP to sign on and to help us out, then this, we've heard it said so many times that this could be a model. Let's find out if the DEP wants to go with this.
Barb, do you want to comment quickly?
Brent, I just want to say one thing about that. We promised at town meeting, and to all the people who were part of that Save Little Pond movement, that we were going to protect that pond with zero. And I feel like we're really going against that when we start talking, negotiating that amount. I will also tell you, please, come on over to my house. We live on a D-night system. And I know that came up at town meeting. And I would love any of you to come over and see that. And really see that, what happens when you live on a D-night system and the alarm goes off. And why it goes off. And why you have to stop on 4th of July using your water. Not
But
a great system.
That's just one of many systems,
cheer.
Barbara.
We'll all cheer when sewers come down Davisville, believe me.
Thank you very much for listening, for asking questions. Our hope is that we can schedule a meeting in early May when people have had time to look through this and digest it, that we, in the meantime, would start a process, perhaps move it along quickly to see about an RFP to select an additional consultant. We're very happy with the work we've gotten from MHP, but as Mr. Murphy says, if it helps the process to have someone else look at it, I think we want to build support and make sure it's being done just exactly the way you and we would like it to be. Thank you very much.
All set from the board?
Yep.
All right.
Yes, thank you very much.
All right, next item on our agenda is a new entertainment license for Grill 327 at 327 Gifford Street.
Mr. Chairman, just for disclosure purposes, this isn't fully necessary, but I'm the holder of an all alcohol and seasonal liquor license. I just have one question, if I might.
Mm-hmm.
On your application, you have 7 a.m. for the entertainment license?
Oh, no.
You have 7 a.m. to 12 p.m.
Could you identify yourself for the record, please?
I'm Bill Grogan, one of the owners. That's the times we're open. That's
Okay.
all.
So when would
We're
you...
looking for, we're just looking for entertainment at night.
So
It'd be from
5 to...
6 to, 11, 11:30. That's about it.
So your application then 6 to 11:30, is that what you're asking for?
Yes, at night.
Because once we vote that you'll be held to that.
Okay. Maybe on Saturday in the afternoon or something, I guess.
So what's the amount, what are your...
Saturdays from 12 in the afternoon to close, and then every other day from 6 to 12 at night, I guess.
Well, why don't we, we can't do by the day, do you follow what I'm saying? So why don't, it would be noon until 11:30, be all right, every night of the week?
Noon to 11:30.
And that would cover your Sunday as
That
well.
would cover
I make a motion that we do issue an entertainment license for Rogan's from noon to 11:30 p.m. The hours of operation.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion from the board? Okay. Is there anyone in the audience who'd like to comment on this application? Okay, With that, all those in favor of the motion? Aye. Any opposition? Unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you. And the next item on our agenda is a new Class 1 motor vehicle license, Cape Cod Classic Cars LLC, 770, East Falmouth Highway. This is for basically a license to buy, sell, exchange, or assemble second-hand motor vehicles or parts thereof.
Mr. Chairman, I was reviewing this over the weekend. He's going to be selling cars on eBay, is what it is, but he's going for a Class 1, which is for new vehicles, and shouldn't he be actually going for a Class 2?
Is the applicant here to answer any questions? I don't believe so.
Mr. Braga might be right.
Is there any problem with issuing we have a note here from Chief Riello that the department has no problem with the issuance of a Class 1 permit. If the gentleman wants to apply for a Class 1.
The vehicles are predominantly indoor, stored for resale. The marketing will be conducted over eBay. Customers will either bid to buy on eBay or call for pricing. After a sale is made, the vehicle will be shipped.
Is a Class 1, if I may ask to the town manager, is a Class 1 provide all opportunities versus a Class 2, or the specifics? Do you have any idea?
I don't consider myself an expert on it, Selectman Murphy, but my understanding is that they are more exclusive along the lines you're talking about. The Class 1 would be for fundamentally new vehicles, and Class 2 for, as Selectman Braga indicates.
Right here, Class 1. That's what I was reading.
Purchase and sale of second-hand motor vehicles.
Well, we don't necessarily have to act on it this evening. We could ask for some clarification from the applicant and/or town council as to the applicability of the...
And if I might add, if I can just read this one line, is the sale of new motor vehicles, the purchase and sale of second-hand motor vehicles being incidental or secondary therein may be granted. So in other words, under a Class 1, used vehicles are incidental.
A Class 1 is a dealer, takes a trade in and can sell the new...
Right. In other words, what I consider incidental is less than 50%. So if he's not selling any new vehicles, maybe we can correspond with the applicant. There's also a referral from the Zoning Board of Appeals that they would need to amend or apply for an amendment to the current zoning board ruling on that property. So, I mean, I wouldn't have a problem if this was the right application, approving it based with them gaining all the necessary permits, but you bring out a good point, Mr. Braga. If you want to continue this for a week, so we know that we're on the right license.
I would just...
I don't mean to put you on the spot, Mr. McNamara, but seeing as you're here, would you care to comment on the special permit question?
Thank you, Matt McNamara, Chairman of the Zoning Board of Appeals. We were puzzled by the application when we gave the referral because we couldn't tell from the application whether or not there's actually going to be any repair, staging of vehicles. On one hand, it talked almost like it was an internet exchange of vehicles, but then there also seems to be elements of work being done on the site. The special permit only allows for office space and parking of cars incident to the office space. So if there were to be any repair, work on vehicles, assemblage, whatever, there would need to be a modification of the special permit. I can't tell you whether or not that would happen or not. That would have to be an application come before the 5 members of the board.
Isn't 70 East Falmouth Highway the green building on the corner of
No, this is...
John Parker and 28?
Yeah, this is at the corner of John Parker and
That's offices.
70 East Main.
That's
It's
just
offices.
offices. There's no...
Offices and 36 parking spaces
Yeah.
for those offices.
Yeah, there's no...
So that's why we were puzzled by the
repair area.
application.
I'm going to make Can you make a motion to continue this until we can get more clarification?
Go right ahead.
I make a motion, Mr. Chairman, that we'll continue this and get more clarification, and I guess someone will have to reach out to this Melody, the owner, and the applicant, and find out what the problems are with this. It just doesn't seem right.
Okay.
I'll make that motion.
And I'll second it, and if I might have a little discussion. A lot of things on eBay, people are just relatively the broker. The vehicles might not actually land on the site. So if we get that clarification, whether or not they plan on, it would be appropriate if there was just an office, I believe, and that'll be up to the zoning administrator to decide that. But that's one question we'd want answered, and the other question would be, is it appropriate for Class 1 or Class 2 license? So I just wanted to put that on the record.
All right. We have a motion and a second to continue this to get some clarification. Are there any questions from the town manager's office about what it is that we're looking for?
No, we're clear. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. All right, next item on our agenda is to vote the ballot question for the capital exclusion that was approved by town meeting. And the language is very simple. Shall the town of Falmouth be allowed to assess an additional $800,000 in real estate and personal property taxes for the purposes of funding a capital improvement stabilization fund for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2012? Yes or no?
Vague. I think I know what's going to happen with this. It's just vague. I know.
I think, and I don't want to put words in Mr. Souza's mouth, but my understanding is, with his discussions with Mr. Duffy, is that this is the language that is allowed by law. I don't know if you'd like to elaborate, or if I...
Certainly, Mr. Chairman. As you indicated, I had asked Town Council if we could add even a brief additional clarifier along the lines of confirming that the funds would be spent for capital equipment and infrastructure, and the response that Town Council indicated he received was that no, the statute was much more limiting than that, and his recommendation is that we follow the guidelines before us with the ballot language, which would present greater challenges for us in terms of promoting this and clarifying matters to the public, but that would be the challenge that we would face.
Well, we had pre-SEEK meetings and town meeting where people did get educated, but I just seen what's happened the last couple of years with some ballot questions that were just vague.
I'd like to make a motion to approve this as printed, and then have some discussion if there's a second on it.
Okay, I'll second that.
This would be the appropriate time for us to explain to the public what in fact this would be. Because the role of the board would not be to be able to run a public relations campaign at a public meeting. However, in the midst of explaining this article and what's going to happen in the ballot, I think it's appropriate this evening and within the guidelines to be able to explain that. I know there are a lot of folks in town who've heard a lot about this, but the future of funding our capital needs is via a stabilization fund. And the town has committed $530,000 of this year's budget that will be put into that stabilization fund, 520, I believe it is, and committing an additional sum of money, I believe another $300,000 will come from local receipts in some form or fashion by the fall town meeting. Just so folks know, the $800,000 that's being appropriated here, would be voted at the ballot, will be deposited in this fund. And unlike in the past, when folks have had an opportunity to see, well, it's going to be spent on this, this, or this. This is a scenario which came first, the chicken or the egg. In this case, we're going to fund the capital stabilization fund. And then after the money is deposited there, we'll then, at town meeting, look at, debate each and every capital item. And town meeting would have to have a 2/3 majority vote to spend that money for the capital needs of the town. So, unlike in the past, when voters have been able to, in fact, look at something, a specific project, and decide whether they like it or not, or whether or not they believe it needs funding. This process will have additional checks and balances where town meeting will in fact go back and appropriate whatever's available in that fund for specific areas of capital. We may not spend all of this money this year. We may spend all of it, but it will be appropriated by town meeting, and you'll have your opportunity to speak in regard to each and every one of those. Again, a 2/3 majority vote. And it's important to let folks know that the $800,000, although it will be on your tax bill, we have some retiring debt last year, so you would not see an increase in your taxes with this $800,000. We had retiring debt that we had a debt exclusion from the water filtration plant study, so that this $800,000 would in fact, you would not see the difference in your tax bill. So there would be a level increase in some form. It would be disingenuous if we did not say it was not coming from your taxes, but one bill is going away and then this would replace that. So that, wanted to make those comments so that folks understood as we move forward what this is. And I think it behooves each and every one of us to let folks know in the coffee shops, in the street, in any meetings that we have an opportunity to attend, exactly explain to them what this is and how it's to achieve a goal.
To clarify further, Mr. Chairman and Selectman Murphy, if I may, this would represent a level tax effort from one year to the next, and I think fundamentally that's been the approach the board has taken, and would maintain, as Selectman Murphy described, the tax effort consistently from one year to the next without an increase.
Further discussion? All right, we have a motion and a second to approve the text of the question. All those in favor? Aye. Unanimous.
Thank you.
All right, next we have minutes of meeting. This is March 26th, the public meeting, 2012. Are there any questions about the minutes of the public session on March 26, 2012?
Make a motion to approve?
Second.
Okay, motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
In our agenda item, we have executive session minutes. There was a Scribner's error, I guess it's fair to say. This should be approve and vote not to release the executive session minutes at this time. So if there's any question about any of the executive session minutes.
I make a motion to approve and not release?
Second.
A motion and a second. Further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. All right, and back to the summary of actions. We left off with item number 6, discuss and vote fee waive policy. I think in keeping with the earlier discussion that we had regarding policies, that perhaps we want to have the full board here for a complete discussion of this.
I would make a motion, Mr. Chairman, that we do just that. Policies aren't really a light thing. I mean, it's very important, and I just like to see the majority of the board will be here. If that's okay, I'll make that motion.
2 weeks.
Can we do that also on the 23rd? Since we're
Second.
discussing policies on that evening?
Okay.
Thank you.
So a motion to reschedule this to April 23rd?
Yes.
Okay. Do we have a second?
I second it.
Okay. And any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Then we have approved 2012 seasonal liquor annual seasonal liquor license renewals.
Mr. Chairman, when you go to them all, why don't we take each one, because give me disclosure wine and malt in holder's license. I'm the holder of an all-alcoholic seasonal liquor license, and because of the close proximity to the Quick's Hole establishment, I'll refrain from this vote.
Okay.
I don't think we have a quorum, unfortunately, so I would think that we could invoke, that I could invoke the, out of necessity.
The rule of necessity?
Rule of necessity.
Okay, or is it, when
I
do we
do
know
know
when
that-
these licenses expire? These
I'm
are,
not certain about that, Mr. Chair.
these are seasonal.
I do know that, this particular restaurant is not opening, so we could probably, not opening by the time we have a meeting the next time, the 23rd, so they're not open until May, so
Yeah,
I think we could hold this.
Yeah, I would be reluctant to
Yep.
invoke the rule of necessity if this can be done at a later date when we do have a.
Right,
a
I'm not
quorum.
gonna speak for, but I'm pretty sure that I've heard that they're not open until May, so. I can't even make a motion to table in that case, so.
Understood.
So we need a motion to table what?
Well, we don't even need to, we could just not act on these.
So I'll make a motion under common victual that we approve Smitty's Homemade Ice Cream, 326 East Falmouth Highway.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
And the other ones we simply won't act on at this time. We need to reschedule those as well for the 23rd. And finally, we have approved town labor and equipment for drainage work at the Falmouth Dog Park. This was discussed last week during our meeting that was just prior to town meeting, and the recommendation was to schedule it for this week to further the discussion and/or take the vote. Well, we've heard the presentation from the applicant. Ms. Schneider, would you like to?
Barbara Schneider, President of the Falmouth Dog Parks. I would like to give you an update. After Tuesday night's meeting, I made a 7 a.m. phone call to one of the people who had committed to helping correct the problem. And I informed Arthur Aldridge that I did not feel that this was going to end up with a positive vote. And I needed him to help me think of 3 people we could approach and beg them to do the work. So Arthur and I, at 7 in the morning, came up with 3 people, and Arthur volunteered to make the first phone call. And by noon on Wednesday, we were very fortunate to have Mark and Sally Dalpe of Dalpe Excavating come forward and offer to put the drains in for us. It does not make me feel better in the sense that I was sad that after all the efforts that we've all put in, and this now makes 22 local businesses that have done in-kind work to help the dog park exist, not to mention the scores of volunteers. I had hoped we could get 1 day's labor support from the town. But under the circumstances, we have solved our own problem. We will go forward and proudly continue to maintain the park at the level we have been, and that's my report.
Thank you, Dr. Schneider, and I applaud you for your efforts, and thank you very much. All right.
I'm glad that we were able to accomplish that. Ms. Snyder actually called Mr. Aldrich before I had an opportunity to the next day, and spoke to him in regard to the same reason that I spoke to him. And I know that there were other folks reaching out to other people, and as Virginia Valiela used to say, and still does, we're a can-do town, and we can find ways to get things done, and still live within constraints that we've developed, and in this case, it was a memorandum of understanding. So I'm glad that we had a successful conclusion.
Mr. Chairman and members of the board, pardon me, just wanted to interject that, given that it is a drainage improvement on town-owned property, it should be coordinated with, of course, our acting town engineer, Peter McConerty, just as a matter of course. I want to note that for the record, if I may.
I went out there yesterday, actually, and I was, took some pictures, but there's already a drain in the ground, and evidently, even that fills.
If I could address that, two things. First of all, Peter has been involved in the entire process. He's been the coordinator, the designer of the correction. He's worked incredibly closely with both John Lyons and with Arthur Aldridge on solving this. And so it will be following his design. Secondly, the drain that's in there, as you might have noticed, Selectman Braga, it is way too low. Everything has literally run into the drain, and it has to be completely taken out of the ground and raised and put back in with more stone in it, and then all the paving will solve that constant runoff that's making it so low in the ground. It is an unfortunate situation. I don't know what we could have done differently. Really, I wish, you mentioned at town meeting, or Kevin, you might have mentioned at town meeting that you didn't think we had a problem. Well, I will tell you that if you go out and go to the east of the dog park itself, you will notice an extensive town drainage system that actually sits on a piece of right-of-way that the town has. There is a lot of water issue there, and because of the way the land was farmland and so filled with topsoil, you didn't see that. But as soon as you removed all that soft earth and got down to the flat hard earth, which is what we had to do, it became a noticeable issue. But that drainage is there, and it's been there a long time. All things considered, had we known this at the beginning, we could have carved in and connected to that from day one, but you can't do it after the fact. So we're doing the best we can, and I think this is the right solution. And we're within about $50 of our budget, and so we're holding our breath that our future endeavors for raising funds will continue to keep us providing poop bags. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, any reports from the board?
Yes, a couple of things. Number one is I had the opportunity today to go to MMR, commonly known as Otis, with the town manager was there as well. Lieutenant Governor Tim Murray was there with Senate President Murray, as well as both Representative Vieira, Representative Madden, and a whole contingent from Mass Development and what have you, trying to get ahead of the base closure scenario that looks like it'll be coming down the pike. Try to make sure that we save the vital resource that we have there, save the jobs that are in this community, save the assets that they provide to this community as well as the other surrounding communities, as well as the fact of the environmental issues that have been addressed from the base. So it was a productive first start meeting, a roundtable discussion, and they formulated some working groups. One to save Otis again. Representative Vieira will be the chairman of that group. So I know he'll be looking out there to get some support to try to work to do that. And that was productive. And of course, the only other report that I wanted to say was I'm hoping that our new town manager hasn't brought a bad penny with him when he came from Framingham, because we went to 4 nights at town meeting, and I don't remember that in quite some time. So let's just stop it there at 4 and try to make sure that we have the brevity and work through it. That's my only reports I have.
Anyone else?
I just actually have a question. I have my list here, but I can't find it. But Julie, in the list I handed you earlier in the office, there's one of the things when I went to the beach committee meeting a couple of weeks ago was, and I know Frank was away for personal reasons for a while, but we're going to have him look into the money from the casino, the $100,000 regarding using it for a handicap ramp for that beach. Is that considered enhancing the beach? And that's what we're waiting for a decision on. I just thought I'd bring it up again.
Yes, that's one of the items that Town Council Duffy is looking into and should be getting back to us in the next few weeks.
Thank you very much.
One other thing, Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to note that there is a public meeting on the 12th in regard to the wind coming up.
I believe the town manager was going to make note of that.
Okay, and the other thing is kind of a discussion I would hope that we would relay to the Madam Chairman that we would need to have some discussion in an open public forum in regard to the town meeting votes and how this group wants to proceed. Okay.
Mr. Suso?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank the board for your steadfast support for the creation of an integrated finance department within the town organization. The further support of the Finance Committee and town meeting in the week past was extremely gratifying. I do look forward to the considerable enhancement to the town's management capacity and organizational effectiveness and efficiency in the months to come. Also, members of the board, for your information, the town is currently soliciting bids for the Shiverix Pond Pump Station Odor Control Improvement Project. Bid opening scheduled for May 15th. The work being funded from the $1.5 million town meeting authorization set aside for wastewater and force main will consist of demolition of existing odor control equipment and constructing new odor control facilities which are designed to solve the vexing odor problems which have been experienced from this station. At this point, it's anticipated that construction will not begin in all likelihood till after Labor Day, with completion in the spring of 2013. If there would be any adjustments to that schedule, we'll be advising the board. I'm also, Mr. Chairman, asking for the board's consideration to authorize my attendance at the spring conference of the Massachusetts Municipal Management Association, which is scheduled from May 31st through June 1 at Cranwell Conference Center in Lenox. Registration is $275 and the overnight rate is $191. This spring conference includes an ICMA University workshop as well as very helpful and informative sessions on labor law, contract updates, and legislative matters of importance to municipalities. And pursuant to my contract with the board, I am to request your consideration of that, and I would so request respectfully.
Mr. Chairman, can we take a vote on that this evening?
It's have to be posted.
I would think it would have to be posted as part of our agenda.
So if we can do that for 2 weeks from this evening?
Put it on for the 23rd, date
We'll make sure it's
specific,
on
and
the
we'll...
23rd.
Yeah.
Very good, thank you. Also, members of the board, this week I was pleased to approve the application developed by Peter McConerty in cooperation with Ray Jack for Chapter 90 project requests to the state for local roadway projects. The town's funding allocation totals $1,459,170 for a variety of roadway projects involving Main Street, Shore Street, Landers Road, Seacoast Shores Boulevard, and others. And we're certainly happy to receive those roadway funds from the state and to be allocating them in a manner beneficial of residents. And finally, Mr. Chairman, I'd ask if Heather Harper could provide a brief summary announcement along the lines Selectman Murphy referred to about the wind turbine consensus building meeting with stakeholders scheduled for this Thursday. Heather?
Well, you both have done an excellent job already. Thursday evening at 7 p.m., the Consensus Building Institute will be convening a meeting of all stakeholders, of which the Board of Selectmen is one of them, the individual members as well as the board itself. A note went out to all the 53 interviewees, but that meeting is also open to anyone in the community that feels they have a stake in that project and the long-term solution finding process. They drafted a report, which this board received, I think, on March 22nd, and requested that the town assist them in finding a location for that meeting as soon as practicable. Last week, obviously, we're glad we didn't schedule it for last Thursday, because we all would have been busy. So that is scheduled for 7 p.m. at the Herman Meeting Room at the library. Stacy Smith will be facilitating that meeting. We'll also post it as a meeting of the Board of Selectmen because we expect more than a quorum of the board will be there, but it will be fully facilitated by the Consensus Building Institute. The proponents or the drafters of the two additional reports, Centec and DNB, will be there to answer questions, but another forum will be scheduled at a future point to have them present their reports and findings. That is it.
That concludes my report, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Just have the time on the application.
It doesn't have to be changed on here either.
Well, the time isn't specified on there.
I know they will put it on there.
So have a new one done?
All right.
It's approved, but we have to do a new one, I guess, and we'll
All
sign
right.
it again.
Okay. That concludes our agenda. As I've done in the past when I'm chair, I'll open it up. Questions from the audience, from the public, or from the press? All right, then. I think we're done with our agenda. Motion to adjourn.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
Cavosa Excavating is a family-owned and operated company specializing in the installation of Title V septic systems. Cavosa Excavating is one of the largest septic system installers on Cape Cod. Whether it's upgrading your current system or installing a whole new system, Cavosa Excavating can do the job. Cavosa Excavating, 508-563-5530.
Nestled in a classic New England setting, amid 200-year-old elm trees and charming colonial homes, stately sea captains' homes, and charming Cape Cod salt boxes, Shoreway Acres is a graceful blend of Cape Cod's past and present. Shoreway Acres, proud sponsor of Falmouth Community Television.